Ladies and gentlemen, council members, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, June 17th, 2019, to order. We do not have a pastor, so if everyone will stand, we'll just have a moment of silence, and then Mr. Overdeer will lead us in the pledge. Skip. Thank you, Ms. Overdeer. First up is the agenda approval.
Mr. Mayor, I believe on items 5A and B, we're going to continue those two items to July the 1st. We're waiting on a document from the state. Just didn't want anybody to sit in the audience unnecessarily and waiting for those two items.
Which item was that?
5A.
Oh,
That will be the second reading of ordinance 1902 LC, zoning map amendment, and B is the second reading of ordinance 1903 PC, future land use map amendment. So if you were here for those two items, we are not going to go over them. So just to give you the heads up. Other than that,
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second. Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of 5A and 5B.
I would also like to remove G1.
G1,
Oh, okay.
which one? Okay, you want to remove that? Okay.
Well, for clarity, can we ask you to continue it to a time and date certain so we don't have to re-advertise? 5A and B? Be July 1st at 6?
Yeah, absolutely. I move to continue 5A and B to July 1st.
And pull G1.
And pull G1, otherwise adopting the agenda as presented.
Second.
I got a motion, I have a second. Any other comments? Seeing none? Vote unanimous, so moved. All right. Next, we have, that was the approval of the minutes, right?
The first one we did was the approval.
Yeah.
Skip got ahead of us.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
That's no big deal.
That's all right, Skip. You're always in charge. Up next will be a presentation. We have representatives from Florida Department of Transportation, Mr. Rodney Chamberlain.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, the minutes, please.
Oh, I thought we just did that. We did that twice.
Did you do the minutes?
We did it out of order. Did the minutes first one.
You got to be fast here, Ray. These guys are tricky up here. I struggled myself.
Two of our second readings are out of the way, so we'll make it early now.
Okay, so we're all on the same. Let me go back to my introduction again. Sorry about that, gentlemen. Representing the Florida Department of Transportation is Mr. Rodney Chamberlain, Mr. Tim Smith, and Mr. Jared Perdue, Director of Transportation Development. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Jared Perdue. I'm the Director of Transportation Development for District 3. I report directly to District Secretary Philip Gaynor, who reports directly to State Secretary Kevin Tebow. With me are Rodney Chamberlain and Tim Smith, two of our department heads in our development section, and also Ian Satter, our public information officer. So really appreciate the invitation to be here. We don't have a formal presentation. I was asked to come by the council and by the city manager, and so I'm here at your pleasure to answer any questions you have and enter into any discussions that you may have for us.
Well, I'm sure we prepared a list of questions that council members had. 33 total is what I have in front of me. I hope you had an opportunity to look at some of them. Seeing how council members at this point, I guess we can start down there at your end, Rodney, and we'll just work across here. Do you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask the FDOT representatives, or does somebody just want to step up and start the process?
Let's go with these questions.
How do you want to do it? You want to go through the questions one at a time?
Yeah, and you've seen those questions, right? They were emailed.
I have, Councilwoman. I really appreciate the opportunity to review those. They're fairly extensive, and you know, for the sake of brevity, I did not want to sit up here and reread the questions and give you answers. So, you know, I thought we could have a discussion about it, and I've seen all of them, so very prepared. If you want to ask, or you know, any spin-off discussions, I'll be happy to talk about it.
Go ahead.
I'll just start it off. And I haven't seen these questions yet. Were they emailed to us? Or is these questions from a council member, or?
Some of all of us.
Well, I don't, I got you. I read some that were kind of on my train of thought. First of all, the Crosstown connector that y'all are helping to fund, 0.4 miles, it's going to be a 2-lane road, correct?
So that's an excellent question that I cannot specifically answer, and I'll explain why. The Crosstown connector is actually not a DOT project. Mm-hmm. It's a City of Destin project and is in the TPO's priorities. It's in their long-range plan, and it was put there based on the study and the priorities of the locals. And so when you follow the TPO process and it goes into the long-range plan and it goes into the priorities and the TPO actually votes to adopt those priorities, then it makes it eligible for FDOT funds. If it's off-system, it's only eligible for federal funds. And so what happens is, as a representation of the local body, the Planning Council comes to us with your adopted priorities and says, this is our top priority, please consider funding for this priority. And so what you see in our work program is actually $2.7 million for right-of-way acquisition in fiscal years 21 and 22. However, it's not a DOT administered, not DOT managed. Sure. We're not making any of the decisions on the project, how the typical section is going to look, or any of that.
Okay, and I'm familiar with the TPO project, and what TPO has in front of us is a 2-lane road. The concern we've had is in a PD&E study from years ago. It showed a proposed section of Legion from Main Street to Beach, and then from Beach onto Azalea is expanding to 4 lanes. But could you say that the city has the ability to keep this road at 2 lanes if we'd like? FDOT's not going to come in and...
So what would determine that is the federal document that was produced as part of the PD&E that was done. And
Sure.
So, you know, you get approval from the feds for the impacts of a corridor, right? And you can make changes within that corridor as long as they're not causing additional impacts. Now, that's easier said than really understood, because, you know, additional impacts could be socioeconomic, environmental. There's so many things considered there. So, you know, if you are changing the scope so much that you are modifying the purpose and need that was established as part of that original PD&E, then it could cause issues. But that would be a discussion for the city and the feds.
Okay. And was there any plan from FDOT to rename that corridor alternate Highway 98?
No, sir. That is strictly a local facility.
So we would have within our purview to name that road whatever we'd like, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Rodney?
Thank you, Mayor. One question that's come up was we have the multimodal, and we are no longer in the concurrency state with the traffic count on 98 anymore, so it really doesn't matter if we build a 2-lane or 4-lane road somewhere else to get traffic off of Highway 98, it won't affect the traffic count at all. Can you elaborate on that any at all, or?
So, yes, the city of Destin does have a declared multimodal transportation district, and that does affect the way that you handle concurrency. Now, FDOT has no authority or jurisdiction in that area, but, in reading through your multimodal plan, it appears as though the land use and the land development is responsible for doing certain things as part of that multimodal district. And really, our involvement with that would be anywhere that the Crosstown connector traffic, whether it's relieving congestion or causing more congestion, wherever it impacts FDOT at those connections, we would have involvement with how that connection looks. But that would be the scope of it.
So with us having the multimodal, that US 98 could never be, say, at capacity on the traffic count?
Well, as far as traffic goes, US 98 is definitely at capacity. I mean, in most cases, especially during your peak traffic conditions, it's at a level of service F. And so it has reached its maximum vehicular capacity. Now, that's just for vehicles. Then you also have all the other modes. You have pedestrians, you have bicycles, you have transit. And so there's a lot of other things that could potentially be done along that corridor other than just adding, say, travel lanes in the future. So I'm not sure, the Crosstown connector, as proclaimed by the city, really the purpose and intent of that is to provide more connectivity and more networking for the different modes. So it's not necessarily focused primarily on vehicles, but it's really pedestrians, bicycles, transit, and the whole 9 yards.
That's all I have right now, Mayor. Thank you.
While I got you up there, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that were on the top 3 questions. These are questions I wanted, and they're based off of testimony we have on the public record of one of our previous meetings. So I'm just going to ask you those 3 in a row, and then I'll give an opportunity for any one of our other council members. Are there any public records in your FDOT archives that could substantiate claims that due to the level of service on Highway 98 traffic corridor, that FDOT told the city that if they didn't create an alternative traffic corridor, that FDOT would stop issuance of permits for projects along the Highway 98 corridor?
That, frankly, is an outlandish suggestion. We would never do that. I mean, we're statutorily obligated to provide reasonable access to all private property owners. I'm not aware of any, and I mean, we have, just in District 3 alone, we have 500 employees, but that is certainly not an acceptable thing to say at any point in time. So I don't see that as an issue.
Right, and then to substantiate the claim that in question 1 by a former council member, what permit granting authority does FDOT have, or that FDOT could use to hold the city, hostage is a tough word, with threats of withholding permits of any kind for development?
So again, we are statutorily obligated to provide reasonable access to private property owners. It has really nothing to do with the city other than the fact that the city is a partner of FDOT, just like counties are our partners. And so, again, the idea of one governmental entity holding another one hostage is just preposterous to me. I can't imagine a world where that would even exist.
Okay, well, this is based off of testimony we've had in these chambers. So my last question is, does FDOT have the authority by state statute or policy to dictate to local government like Destin what would take precedence over our city's capability or authorities control development or density in any of your traffic corridors?
So the Florida Department of Transportation does not have jurisdictional authority over land use and land development.
Okay.
We're strictly transportation per Florida statute.
That's okay. And those are kind of, they seem like outlandish questions, but that was some outlandish testimony that we heard. And I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that your organization doesn't hold our cities development capabilities in any type of situation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate the opportunity to answer those questions. And, you know, again, we consider the city of Destin a great partner in transportation along with all of our other local governments. So,
Mr. Overdue.
Yeah, the only thing I had, and this is almost outside the purview of the Crosstown Connector, but it kind of ties in with it, I guess. Has there ever been, or is there any future plans on from FDOT to ever do anything alternate to Highway 98, anywhere here to go from east to west?
okay, that is an excellent question, and it's also a very heavy topic because, I mean, we all know what 98 looks like, not just in Okaloosa County, in Destin proper, but, you know, throughout the entire Panhandle. It's definitely constrained in most cases by water on both sides. The crossings over that water are limited, and it's usually a long ways around. With regards to alternate corridors, there's a lot of challenges with that, specifically, you know, one of our biggest land owners, which is our military bases, and also the biggest economic driver for our region. So, you know, there's a lot of benefits to that. And, you know, there have been alternative corridors looked at, but one thing that is unique about the way FDOT does business is we don't go look at alternative corridors that have not been already conceived by the local transportation planning organization. So if it has not been conceived as an idea and studied as a feasible potential alternative corridor, we're not going to go look at it. And so FDOT is not the one, unless it originates in the legislature, we're not the ones who actually conceive the alternative or new corridors. That's done at the transportation planning level. It's a great question.
Mr. Mitchell.
First of all, thank you for coming, sir, you and your staff. I have 15 questions, but I have 3 that I just got based on your information you gave Councilmember Morgan. You said based on a study. When you answered him, you said based on a study. Specifically, what study are you referring to?
I'm sorry, could you clarify which question?
Okay, when you answered Mr. Morgan's question earlier, okay, you talked about, well, we were based on the study. And I didn't want to interrupt, but you say study. There's about 5 or 6 different studies that I'm in possession of right now, and I don't have them all. So what study are you referring to?
So in order for the Crosstown Connector.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
So, thank you, yes. For the Crosstown Connector, in order for it to be eligible for federal funds, it would have had to go through the federal national environmental permitting process, okay? And so there would have had to be a project development and engineering study done for that corridor, and I would assume that the city was the one that did that study and that it would be somewhere on file.
Okay, so you don't know what study, you don't know the date, you don't know that?
I do not, no, sir.
Okay, could you get that information and provide it?
I can certainly research it. It was years ago. If it's something that FDOT has in our files, we will definitely provide that.
Let me just give you a little caveat, and I appreciate it. I'm not trying to, this has been going on, like the mayor said way back, this has been going on for 32 years. What I'm doing is I'm taking the time to educate myself, and I'm trying to learn all the nitty-gritty about the Crosstown Connector. I've got a box full of documents, and I'm not finished yet. So again, I'm not trying to be smart with you or argumentative. When you say study, I'm just trying to ask you specifically because I want to know what study, because we've got study upon study that contradict each other and whatnot. So I'm going to be asking you several questions as you answer my questions, because I'd like to know specifically what study.
Thank you, Councilman. One thing to clarify about that is typically when the PD&E study is done, if it's a state facility or intended to be a state facility, then FDOT will manage the study. If it's a local facility and will always be a local facility, then typically the local government manages the study.
I'll give you an example. This is just, we have a timeline, okay? In 1995, Council voted to ask G, J, K, A, L, and R, along with FDOT to provide traffic alternatives. That was 1995. In 1997, Council asked FDOT to complete a PD&E study. That's 2 years later, in 97. Okay, I don't know what happened between 95 and 97. In 2000, FDOT presented to Council traffic alternatives, but that's mislabeled because it really wasn't traffic alternatives. All it was a pathways master plan. It wasn't a traffic study. It was for bike pathways. Okay. In 2001, we go to 2001, council again asked FDOT to complete another PD&E study. Okay. So again, from 97 to 2001, don't know what happened, but there was another study asked for. And I could go on and on, but I'm just trying, that's why I'm trying to say there's numerous studies, and that's why I'm just interested to know that. Okay, the other thing you answered before, when you talked about 98 and capacity and whatnot, if and when the Crosstown connector is complete, will that in any way impact the trips on the road on 98 as far as FDOT is concerned?
I can answer that question speculatively, but I can't give you a definitive answer on it. But what I can say is that just the nature of the connector and the connectivity it's going to provide, it definitely could help with some of your local trips, right? I mean, as far as within Destin, you know, the more connectivity you provide, the better network you provide, obviously the more options people have, and it can help alleviate congestion on all facilities, not just 98.
Okay, so you can't say specifically. And again, I'm just trying to understand this. I apologize. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But if you can't answer specifically, who can? Who at FDOT? In other words, we're looking at FDOT to give us answers so we can make informed decisions. So at what point does it go up the flagpole for FDOT to say positively this will or will not happen?
Thank you, Councilman, and I will try to address that question in the best way I can. This is a local road. It is not an FDOT facility, so we do not hold the answers to those questions.
But if the road is completed, it could impact the road that you are responsible for.
It certainly could.
So who makes that
Absolutely.
decision at FDOT, that it's impacted?
There's not, with respect to the question, Councilman, there's really, I mean, it's a discussion, you know, and any improvements you make on any of the side streets throughout the city could impact the congestion on 98, either positively or negatively, depending on what you do. You're providing enhanced pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, you know, all of that gives people more options. And so, in theory, right, it impacts the traffic on all facilities when you provide more connectivity. However, there's not really a decision, a definitive decision as to whether it's going to alleviate a specific type of traffic on 98, because I mean it's a regional multimodal transportation infrastructure project, so it's going to impact every transportation facility within the city.
And just to clarify, so FDOT doesn't have a decision-making process on the connector because it's a local project.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I'm not asking about the connector. I continue to ask if the connector is finished, and I understand, I'm not going to ask again because you can't answer it, but at the end of the day, my question is, I understand you don't have any authority over the connector, but if the connector is finished, my question is, does FDOT have a decision-making in whether or not it affects trips on the road? And you've answered that. The other thing I want to ask, and then I'll get into my 15 questions, you mentioned about the Crosstown connector, and you mentioned about different types of transportation, biking and walking, and you used the word transit. Are there plans for transit on the Crosstown connector as far as FDOT's concerned?
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. I do not know the answer to that question. Again, it's a local facility, and the plan is up to the City of Destin as far as the improvements that are made. I have pulled information from the city's website, and it's very clear that the Crosstown connector is intended to support the multimodal plan within the city, which means that it would provide facilities for all modes.
Okay. Mayor, do you want me to go ahead with my series of questions now? Okay.
You got the floor.
Thank you. Well, I can stop, I can start, whatever. Okay. You had these questions, and we'll just go with it. When and if the last 4/10 of a mile portion from Beach Drive to Benning Drive is complete, does that finish the Crosstown connector, or is there any other projects, future expansion construction projected, i.e. punch through Calhoun, for the Crosstown connector in your knowledge, that FDOT's aware of?
I do not have the answer to that question.
Okay. Can you find out from someone?
Again, it's not. It would be a question for the city because it's a city facility.
I know what the city our issue here is, sir, is that I have a fairly good understanding of what the city is, but our questions have been for a long time now. We've asked for months and months for somebody to come, and we're grateful you're here. But that's what we're trying to figure out what FDOT knows and get answers from FDOT that will allow us to make decisions. The next question, which I'm sure I'll get the same answer, but when and if the last 0.4 of a mile is completed, will that in any way impact the trips on the road? And again, that's duplication. We've already gone that. When and if the last 0.4 of a mile is complete, which completes the Crosstown connector, will this in any way impact future development? And you've answered that. Again, I'm just going over this. Okay. Next one is, if the last 0.4 of a mile is not completed, what impact will this have on any future development? And you've answered that. To your knowledge, will the Crosstown connector ever be named alternate Highway 98?
To my knowledge, Councilman, there is no intention for it to be named alternate 98 because, again, it is a local facility.
Could it be called alternate 98?
I don't have an answer to that question here. I mean, that was not the purpose and intent of the project, and so, you would have to hit rewind and go back and start over and find out, what exactly it's going to do to Highway 98.
No, but but is that something you can determine from FDOT? Could that legally, whatever, be called alternate 98 by the city?
It could, but the process would have to be almost completely started over.
What process?
The process of establishing a purpose and need and going through the PD&E and figuring out, what the facility, what the intent of the facility actually is.
Okay, great, thank you. You've already answered my question. What will the last 0.4 of a mile roadway be named? As far as FDOT's concerned, you have no issue there. Will FDOT ever reroute any vehicle traffic to the Crosstown connector?
We don't. The Crosstown connector, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, would just provide more options for motorists. We don't specify or dictate where motorists go and what facilities they use. They're all public access.
But is it possible that FDOT would reroute traffic to that?
No, sir.
Okay. Does FDOT have any money earmarked to development for plans from Legion Drive from Main Street to Beach Drive? Does FDOT?
On the Crosstown connector?
Just
No, it's
Legion
a
Drive
section
from
of
Main Street to
Legion
Beach.
just prior to the 0.4 miles.
So it's not part of the
No.
connector?
Not the 0.4
Well, it is the
mile.
connector, but it's not the 0.4 of a mile that's not finished.
It's the section just before it.
We currently, is it part of the overall corridor of the, okay, so currently we have the funding that's in our work program for the corridor is $2.7 million for right-of-way acquisition. That's the only thing in our program for the connector project as a whole.
Okay. From an FDOT perspective, on Harbor Boulevard or on 98, whichever roadway you want to call it, how long does the city of Destin have to come into compliance with the multimodal plan?
We don't, the multimodal plan is not FDOT's, it's actually something that local governments develop under their jurisdiction and authority, and when we come in with a project, we just simply try to match our project to whatever your comprehensive plan is. We do the best we can. Every facility we design and construct accounts for all modes of transportation. We do the best we can within the right-of-way that we have. And so if a city like the city of Destin has a multimodal plan, when we come in like with the resurfacing project, we take the funding that's been allocated and we take the available right-of-way and we do the best that we can to fit your comprehensive plan. So, the answer to that question is that would be, a local government.
Okay, well, let me ask it another way. The city of Destin came up with a multimodal plan. That had to be approved by FDOT?
No, sir, it did not have to be approved by FDOT. We're a partner, and so we review the plan and we review your comprehensive plan and we provide comments that we may have regarding transportation, but we do not have final approval authority of that.
I'm going to ask our staff to weigh on that in a minute. It was my understanding, and I could be wrong, okay, way back when, the city manager and the staff at that time, because of the trips on the road, way back when, okay, they developed a multimodal plan which would have alleviated some of the trips on the road on Highway 98. Staff, am I right? Am I wrong? Can you all speak to that?
That is my understanding, yes. That the city did.
So
adopt a
multimodal plan was approved allegedly by FDOT, which alleviated some of the trips on the road. Now, whether or not that had anything...
The multimodal was voted on by the council for.
Right, but I understand, but FDOT, it satisfied the trips on the road for FDOT. That's the end result of the multimodal. Is that correct?
Councilman, I can probably provide a little more clarification. So anytime the multimodal plan, my understanding is by its very nature a part of your larger comprehensive plan. And, you know, whenever a local government adopts a comprehensive plan, they send it to FDOT for review and comment. We do not have approval authority. We are a stakeholder. We're a transportation stakeholder, and we are a partner. And so we want, you know, I think the idea there is collaboration. We don't have approval authority. So when the multimodal plan was developed, which predates me, you know, there probably would have been collaboration and back and forth, and we may even reviewed it and provided comments, but we don't have approval authority over your comprehensive plan.
Okay. But did the creation of the multimodal plan alleviate trips on the road?
Well, physically, I would have to...
The concurrency, traffic concurrency.
That is not a question for FDOT. I mean, physically, the plan doesn't alleviate anything. You have to actually build infrastructure to alleviate traffic. And, you know, if you take the multimodal plan and you build one of the infrastructure projects that's been laid out as meeting that plan, which, you know, the city has a very comprehensive plan. I mean, there's a lot in there. And you build those projects, then at that point in time, you know, the intent is, yes, it does relieve congestion by providing more connectivity to the different modes.
So as far as the FDOT is concerned, even though FDOT didn't mandate this, the city basically approved it. I understand what council said. Yes, the council approved it, but there were certain elements that had to come into that for the plan to actually be a plan. And we're not in compliance with that right now. We don't have parking, we don't have 10-foot sidewalks, okay? But yet we're getting credit from, you know, for trips on the road because we have a multimodal product. Is that correct?
That is outside of my area of expertise. What I can tell you is, with regards to FDOT facilities, you have a multimodal plan. Let's say it includes 10-foot wide sidewalk. Well, you know, we're constrained by right-of-way on 98. So we can't go and just put 10-foot wide sidewalk without buying additional right-of-way. And so that would be what we would consider an infrastructure project. In order to do that, it would have to be prioritized by the TPO and put in their long-range plan, and then funding would have to be identified, and that would start the process. So, you know, there's nothing that, I mean, from an FDOT perspective, there's nothing in or out of compliance. It's just a function of, you have a multimodal plan. When we come in with a project, we do our best to fit that plan as a partner.
Okay, thank you. Is there an approved, dedicated right turn lane into the Emerald Grand coming off the Marla Bridge as part of the 3R project?
Yes, sir, there is.
Fantastic. Great, thank you. We've gotten mixed information about that, so that's great news. I think if you saw the questions, I sent a 2016 master plan, and it had a map associated with it. I don't know if you recall that. And in it, it talked about future roadway. And my question to you is, could you speak about the future roadway?
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay.
Is that good, Steve? Or
No. I'll tell you what, that'll do for now. I'll come back. I'll take a break.
Sure. I've got a question in line with,
Yes, thank you.
his, and then Rodney, I got you up next. In line with that, so, because Mr. Menschel was kind of trying to get a feel, and you kept answering that FDOT doesn't have the authority to designate things multimodal, but for a little clarification, does the designation of US Highway 98 as part of a multimodal corridor give FDOT a capability to ignore capacity on Highway 98 or any other corridor in the state for that matter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, sir, that's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah.
You know, we never ignore capacity, we never ignore safety, we never ignore economic development. We look at all these things. What a multimodal plan does is it gives us more, what I would call leverage, or more stock to go in and make improvements that may otherwise be very controversial. I mean, when you have a local government that passes a comprehensive plan, a multimodal plan, that does things like, you know, affects access along the facility and, you know, provides congestion relief and provides for other modes, you know, sometimes the way the corridor looks and feels can change significantly. It takes a huge public engagement effort, and so a multimodal plan really helps the department come in with this project and be a more collaborative partner with the city.
Okay, my last question, then I'll turn it over to Mr. Braden. When FDOT prioritizes or funds, or partially funds, infrastructure improvements, like the Crosstown connector, this last 0.4 miles, what is the intent or expectation from FDOT, from the city, that it's working with when you fund us, when you go ahead and set aside those monies?
So the way our work program works is, you know, we have a 5-year work program, and every year the tentative 5-year plan is submitted to the legislature for adoption. The legislature reviews it, and, you know, they do what they do, and ultimately it's passed into law. The governor signs it. We now have a 5-year adopted work program. We received budget authority for the first year of the program, but the whole 5 is adopted and, for lack of a better term, set in stone at that point in time. Changes can be made. There's a process for that. However, when it goes into the adopted 5-year work program, it is considered by us a commitment that has to be delivered. And I say that in this manner. Every dollar is very, very valuable. Resources are scarce. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of unmet needs across the entire state. And so when a commitment goes into the adopted plan, it is a very big deal, and it's a very important thing, because if that commitment then changes or things start falling apart and the project looks like it's not going to be delivered, there are so many other needs that every single dollar is being competed for, both in the district and statewide. So it's a commitment, and it's very important that it be delivered.
So would it be oversimplification to say this is use it or lose it?
That's probably an oversimplification, but, you know, the business is that when you have, you know, resources are scarce, and when you have hundreds of millions of dollars of unmet needs and not that much money to fund them, then, you know, it's a very competitive environment, and there's a lot of other projects that need that money today.
Ms. Ramswell wants to go too. Rodney, would you like to allow her to get some fresh questions, or would you rather go next? It doesn't matter.
I just have one question. If this council voted to eliminate the Crosstown or the multimodal altogether, 100%, just do away with it, would FDOT have any say-so as far as any development or redevelopment on 98 if it's at a 100% capacity?
No, sir. We fund the projects that are developed and prioritized by the TPO, and, you know, that's the source of our transportation projects. And so your multimodal plan is not going to affect that one way or another. What it is it's an opportunity for us to work together collaboratively, and for a partner or a stakeholder like FDOT, when they come in with a project, to know, hey, this is what the city wants, this is what they want their corridor to look like, to feel like, because, you know, 98 is as much yours as it is DOT's. I mean, it's your homes, and so, you know, you know better what you want to look like than we do. But, you know, let's say the multimodal plan's not there, DOT doesn't know what you want 98 to look like. So it's good that something exists, and we want to try to partner and do the best we can to meet that.
So if we eliminated the multimodal altogether, we could just continue to build in high rises and stuff on 98, and FDOT wouldn't have any say-so in that?
We have no authority over land development.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. So, a couple questions. Talking at the very beginning when you were speaking with Councilman Morgan, and you talked a little bit about a PD&E, and FDOT would eventually, I guess, weigh in on that, but it would depend whether they brought it forward or local government brought it forward who would actually manage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there is a PD&E, and it's dated 2016, and it doesn't specifically say whether y'all provided it or asked for it or whether we did, but it clearly indicates that the two options that were merged together to do the connector, this particular piece as well as the expansion of the Legion piece, was to be a couple phases, ultimately ending in a 4-lane road on Azalea and Legion. Do you have any information about that?
So if it was a PD&E done, my understanding of this project is it's been around a lot longer than just 3 years. So if there was a PD&E done in 2016, it was probably a reevaluation, what we call a reevaluation of a previously existing PD&E study. They don't age well. I mean, you have to update things as you go, and if the project doesn't go to construction every so often, you got to update and do a reevaluation and make sure you're still accounting for all the impacts. And so we typically, in that situation, if it's a local facility, the local government will manage the PD&E. Sometimes we do that for the local government if they request it, because again, we're partners. But we're not coming in and dictating how things should look and how they shouldn't look. We're just following the process for the local government. It's very collaborative. So we can certainly, if you'll provide us with that information, we'll check our records and see what we have, and we can, talk about that.
With that being the last PD&E that's done according to what I've been provided by our staff, would that be the PD&E then that you guys ultimately would have viewed and decided to fund?
That, if it's for the Crosstown connector and it is the approved, what we call NEPA document, and it was approved by the federal government, by FHWA, then that would be the one that the project would be based on, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so does that then mean that you're funding, because I know that we have exchanges with the county who reached out to FDOT, and I believe they spoke with someone named, where is it right here? Maria Showalter. They reached out and they were told that if there are any tweaks, that they would not be considered minor, and it would stall and cause the whole process to need to be reevaluated again. Is that your knowledge as well?
That, depending on the context of that conversation, that very well could be, that is definitely the conservative answer, because there's a lot of different things a tweak could mean. But we do have experts, and now we actually, FDOT, out of our central office, has delegation to review and approve those federal documents. And so we have experts within DOT that could review any proposed changes and make that determination. But that's definitely the conservative answer. I think it's the appropriate answer, not knowing what the full context of the changes would be.
So knowing that these funds are TRIP funds, correct? Does that have a different set of criteria that need to be met than other funds that are given by FDOT?
There are a few different levels of environmental and impact statements that you do in a study, and for it to be federal fund eligible, you have to go to a whole another level. To be eligible for state funds, you still have to do some level of it, but not quite as much. And so the short answer to that question is, there are some differences between what makes a project eligible for the TRIP funds and what would make it eligible for discretionary federal funds.
Such as 4 lanes versus 2 lanes and that sort of thing?
Well, it would be more of making sure that the document that was prepared and the purpose and need and intent of the project is being held true. So you would have to go back and reevaluate the document that was done to deliver that project and what the overall impacts of the corridor were, and then we would determine at that point, okay, it's still eligible for state, it's not eligible for federal. If you're doing federal funds, then you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z to make it eligible again. It's an iterative process. It's pretty complicated. So.
Right, I follow. So I see that there's, I believe, 2.7 allocated for right-of-way acquisition.
That's right.
Do you know the exact locations where the right-of-way money is to be utilized?
So that that money was programmed on the overall project limits that were provided to us by the TPO. It's up to the local government jurisdiction that is managing the project to determine how that money is spent. You know, as part of our agreement with you, it would be a reimbursable agreement, and so we would enter into an agreement with the city. The city would actually acquire the right-of-way, and then that expenditure would be reimbursable by FDOT.
Okay, and so then my last question/comment is based on the information that we have received, based on the county reaching out to Maria Showalter of FDOT, and the fact that any tweaks would cause a need for a new PD&E and some additional study to go on. The fact that the PD&E says that we're going to be expanding Azalea and Legion to 4 lanes, if we don't want to expand them to 4 lanes, it's going to require additional PD&Es and other research. Is that correct?
It could. The answer to that question is it could. I cannot answer that question for you here. It has to be reviewed by our experts. And, you know, depending on the scope of the changes and the intent of the project and what the intent of the original document was, a determination could be made on that. That is definitely the appropriate answer that Maria Showalter gave, though, because, you know, we have no idea. You know, if we have to go back and look at it. So
I believe that answers everything I have regarding this topic. I do have a different topic, but I'll let this topic continue before I branch out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm referring right now to 2 documents. This right here is the FDOT document, okay? It's 1995. It's a traffic technical memorandum, 1 of 3. That's one of the 3 documents that the city has. A second document, November 1994 and revised April of 1995, is traffic technical memorandum. And specifically, okay, I'm just going to read one section. I know you don't have this, but this is referring to alternate corridors. And it says, alternate corridor analysis. The project area was initially studied to determine the feasibility of alternate corridors. The use of the existing Kelly Drive corridor was determined not to be feasible due to proximity to existing State Road 30. Because of the wide separation from State Road 30 and the increased travel distance, it was determined that the corridor would not be attractive to through traffic. Public opinion from the steering group meeting indicated the corridor would not be favorable due to the location of the Destin Elementary School and dense residential development along Kelly Drive. Utilizing Airport Road, Legion Drive, and Azalea Drive was also considered. Because of the limited right-of-way and residential land use along Legion Drive and the number of required relocations to connect these existing roads, this corridor is not considered a feasible location. And that came from FDOT. I can't find anything that contradicts this moving forward. FDOT said that this is not a feasible location to use. Can you speak to that?
again, if FDOT, which that predates me, but if FDOT did that traffic technical memorandum, it was done on behalf of the city because the city asked us to do it. It's a partnership. DOT is not the focal point of this facility. It is a local facility. It is, I mean, it's in the TPO's plan, and we're a minor financial partner at this time.
FDOT, excuse me, but I understand what you're saying, but the end result is whether the city may have asked FDOT for this, but this is the document I have that was given to the city by FDOT. And FDOT in plain language and plain writing is saying this is not feasible. So I'm trying to understand. All I'm trying to do is educate myself and find out what happened from 1995 to 2019 that makes it now feasible. I realize and I fully admit there's missing pieces here that I probably don't have. But the documents that the state gave, and there's a lot of them, and I've read them all, this clearly says it's not a feasible alternative. So something had to change FDOT's mind to make it feasible, and I'm just trying to learn what it is.
So, thank you, Councilman. Just to give a little context, you know, the statement that you're reading is part of a really big study, and it could be that it's specifically related to it being an alternative potentially to east-west traffic on 98, whereas there's more to a project than just one goal or one specific purpose. Okay, so there's other elements to a project that make it a good transportation infrastructure project, while it may not necessarily in one segment or one piece of it meet a very specific goal.
Let me give you more specifics. That study was a direct result of the City Council in 1997, actually 1995, asking FDOT for the study. So again, FDOT did it at the request of the city. And they came back and said it's not a viable alternative for a corridor. And all I'm trying to ask you, I know you're not prepared now, but I'm just trying to make decisions. If you could go back and just find out for me what changed to make it a decent alternative now as opposed to an alternative that not considered feasible.
I can, just to clarify, I can say again, that statement is with regard to vehicular traffic, and there's a lot more to be considered. There's a lot more context to take into consideration. So, we'd have to go back and look at it. And
okay, and can you provide that to us, please?
We can certainly take a look at that.
Okay, because this speaks about the alternate corridor. It's not talking about any of the things you're talking about, and again, right. This is at a request, okay, from the city. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, Councilman, I would like to clarify that statement does not make it an unviable transportation project. Again, if it's been through the TPO process and it's supported by the locals and it's in the long-range plan, it's still a viable, fundable project. So I just want to clarify that.
I understand.
So a lot could change in 27 years from the time that state was made, especially when it's really the city council and the TPOs that have more of the design and actual authority to designate something viable or not viable. You just weighed in with your opinion, and that was it 27 years ago. So has your opinion changed now?
That's right, Mr. Mayor. That was based on traffic that was collected at that moment in time. There probably, and I don't want to be misleading, there probably have been a few updates to that technical memorandum. Maybe in 2016 there was another technical memorandum produced. Traffic patterns have changed significantly, and maybe that statement is different today than it was in 97. I don't know that, but you're exactly right. We fund local transportation priorities. A statement in a technical memorandum does not make it a viable or unviable project. If it is a local priority, it's been through the process, it's eligible for funds.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. So the TPO, as I understand it, submits a wish list of projects, local facilities that they'd like you to prioritize. You explain the legislative process, it gets set in stone. What's the methodology that FDOT, I'm making the assumption, but if you give me a nod, I'll probably understand that it's yes, but if we give you a big list, not everything gets funded, right?
That's correct, Councilman. That's
okay.
Exactly right.
So what is the methodology? How does a project make the cut in the eyes of FDOT for a local facility?
There's a lot of factors that go into that. As you mentioned, resources are scarce if you look at the overall need. And we in this district, there's a statutory formula. You receive your discretionary capacity dollars based on your population. And so in this district, we're not as densely populated, and so we have a very specific discretionary allocation. And there's not enough funding to fund all of the priorities in every TPO region, right? And so we have 4 TPO regions in District 3. And so what we do is we look at the viability of the project, the progression of the project in the pipeline, because sometimes there's certain things that have to be done for a project to be delivered, and so you wouldn't want to commit to fund construction on a project that was at risk of not being delivered because some part of the process has not been done. And so it's kind of an iterative process. We have a lot of capacity projects in what we call our capacity pipeline that are not funded all the way through construction. And there's more projects in the pipeline than we have to fund 100% through construction. And so it's all about how the project's progressing, how high of a priority it is on the TPO, and what the availability of those funds are.
Specifically, what about the effect that the local projects have on existing infrastructure that's completely administered, or at least the authority to administer under facilities that are administered by FDOT? how does that process, I mean, I understand, we've talked a lot about scarcity of resources, but exactly how does one project win over FDOT in the game of funding?
Well, when you're looking at funding projects, you always want to fund the highest priorities. I mean, because the locals set the priorities, we fund the priorities. Local investment makes projects compete better. That's just the nature of the business. I mean, you know, it's very wise to leverage funding from other sources with funding of your own. Those compete. So, but you know, you look at the priority and the Destin. My understanding is the Crosstown Connector has been a very high priority for many, many years. It's from an FDOT perspective, it's a local road, so it's not eligible for all of the discretionary capacity funds, but it's eligible for specific state-funded programs like TRIP and also discretionary federal funds. So it's a smaller pot that it's competing for, but it's been a very high priority for many years, and so we try to stick to the desire of the locals on that.
Well, one of the issues, politics flavors everything. It does. We have politicians that designate how the legislature will spend its money. We have politicians who make up the members of the TPO. We have special interests that affect the membership of this council. One of the things I have discovered over the last 3.5 years of being on this board is that I understand that the priorities that have historically been represented on this council have been that of the development community, Chamber of Commerce, pro-development, pro-growth. And while it may have been there, and we've had it this way for a very long time, it's one of the primary reasons we find ourselves in such a crippled position from an infrastructure standpoint is because we always wanted to grow, and we just, through different iterations of councils, there was always a push to say, well, we'll figure it out later. Just let them build, let them build. We can't hit the brakes. That's just too unpopular. And so while I understand the TPO has made it a priority, I represent my local constituents that do not want this in their neighborhoods. A lot of them have grave concerns about the fact that we are currently acquiring right-of-way for a 4-lane road. We have enough money and we wouldn't be spending enough if we just took the 2.7 to, she alluded first, and you said it yourself, if we just said that, well, we're just going to acquire the road acquisition for a 2-lane road, not 4-lane, you said yourself it very well could affect the availability of all the money. So my concern is, where does that leave us? And I'm not a big fan of this project because I know that just simply building this corridor, I'm on the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority right now. We've got problems with our toll booth with regards to the volume of traffic that moves through the bypass that goes around Niceville and stops and sends traffic out into neighborhoods because you can't get them through the travelers from the bypass and onto the bridge quickly enough, and so that traffic spills out and basically landlocks neighborhoods. We have issues with this design right now where the Stallman interchange, which I hope you guys do come to our workshop that we're going to have with regards to hopefully solving some of the issues there, but we don't have really a viable plan for how we're going to get all this crosstown traffic reconnected to Highway 98 so that it can quickly move move west and get onto the bridge. My concern is that we're going to have a lot of cascading effects of the traffic that we've seen on the opposite end of the corridor where our interchanges are not working and functioning right now, and we have backup spillover and gridlock for large sections of the day and for months at a time. So I have a lot of concerns about this one, and I also have the concern that if we redesign this to be a less intensive project, that FDOT would potentially remove all of the cash to acquire the roads, meaning that it gives me the implication that you guys actually do have a position on this, which is it needs to be 4-laned if we're going to put our money behind it. Does that make sense? And you can't offer an opinion on that. I know you don't represent FDOT in that high level capacity, but these are my concerns.
Thank you, Councilman Destin, and you have some very valid points and valid concerns. The thing is that we do not have a position on the 4-laning or 2-laning. We simply fund and deliver transportation projects that are local priorities. We have to defer to the local elected board. And, you know, one thing about the projects that we do fund, they have to be regional in nature, which is why you have a regional TPO, right? So we defer to those locals, and we place a lot of stock in the local TPO board. We don't have a position on whether it should be 4-lane or 2-lane. We want to fund the priority and the project as it was put in the long-range plan and as was intended by the TPO when they asked us to fund it. So that is the bottom line.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. So the .4 mile road that's to be built now to the TPO is going to be a 2-lane. The PD&E shows it to eventually be a 4-lane. Is there, and so you can't say for certain that if we would to request from FDOT an amendment to the PD&E to include that section of Legion Drive and the .4 miles to be a 2-lane, and somehow have city staff, you can't enshrine much in perpetuity, but if you could make sure that this is going to stay a 2-lane road, because I think it does bring good connectivity to our neighborhoods, and it brings through traffic off of Legion Drive from Main Street to Beach Drive to Benning from about 30, 40 homes there. It would immediately improve their quality of life. If we changed it, requested that amendment, would we risk jeopardizing those funds? And if you can't answer that, is there any way we could get an answer from you? Or
I would say that if the city is in a position, if the city council is in a position where the project that is funded as currently intended by the TPO, if it's no longer supported, then you would need for your staff to follow back up with TPO staff at the Planning Council, and we would have a collaborative discussion between city staff, Planning Council staff, DOT to talk about what you're trying to do. Because again, we have to fund what the TPO priority is, right? And so if there's a change to the project, if there's a modification to the project that's been funded, it's going to have to circle back around and be vetted by all those organizations.
But see, all the funds that have been allocated to this project are specifically to build a 2-lane road. Now, the PD&E, the future plans are a 4-lane road, but in terms of Main Street, Legion Drive from Main Street to Beach Drive, there have been no funds by the TPO or anyone allocated to widen that to 4 lanes. It's simply in the PD&E. So the 2-lane road would be built as it's been, drawn up at this point. So, I mean, could we have staff get with TPO and research whether or not if we were to amend the PD&E, because I don't support a 4-lane road going through Legion right there, but I do support this .4 mile section being built, which is as the TPO has it laid out currently. So is there a way for y'all to get with the TPO board and try to see if we were to keep this at 2 lanes and if we were able to assure the public that this was not going to be a 4-lane widening project on that section of Legion Drive, and we can enshrine that in an amended PD&E.
If council directs staff to do that, we will be happy to reach out to the TPO.
And Councilman Morgan, again, we're partners. We're here to answer questions. It's a staff level issue that needs to be vetted by subject matter experts, and I'm just here to let you know that we're more than willing to talk about these things again, because we don't have a position. We're just following the process, and we want to make sure that the TPO priority is delivered as what was committed in the FDOT's 5-year work program. So, we're here to have a collaborative discussion and work through the issues, and we've got a great team of folks that can help you with that.
And since there's currently no money allocated or many discussions of having expanded this section to 4 lanes, how long, in your estimation, would it take to engage in a 4-lane widening project that isn't on a TPO priority list right now?
That's kind of a complicated question. I mean, a project from start to finish, let's say it was just conceived and a facility doesn't even exist, that can sometimes take up to 20 years to deliver. We have delivered one in as quick as 8 years, but there's a lot of pieces that have to fall into place. And so I can't specifically answer for this corridor. I mean, depending on if you have to start over, it could be several more years, or if it's just some slight modifications to the documents that are out there, then maybe it's quicker than that. So.
Well, I know that I sit on the TDC board right now, and I know that there's probably a legislative push to offshore some of the local, if you can get the TDC to pay for some of this stuff, construction standpoint, the better. And I know that there's been some tweaks and some legislation proposed to hand off some of the road construction infrastructure projects to local TDCs all over the state, if that's possible. So as it stands right now, I mean, we've got the right makeup on the TDC board, our local TDC board. They, without hesitation, funded the chunk that is that we're all at issue right now for the construction costs. And to his point, as long as you have the right makeup, you'll be amazed how much money can come out of the TDC for certain projects if it suits certain purposes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Thanks. I wanted to follow up on a question with you and then to address Councilman Morgan's concern about the PD&E. When you look at the PD&E, they looked at 4 different options: no build, increasing the transportation system management and operations system, and then they looked at multimodal alternatives, and last was build alternatives. The first 3 were thrown out as not being feasible or helpful to our situation. All of the build alternatives are 4-laning Azalea and Legion. All of them. So that's what they were looking at when they put this together, which leads me to the question I wanted to ask you. The statement that Councilman Minshall read to you about in the technical memo, do you remember the gist of that offhand, or do you have it handy? Thanks. So this corridor was not considered a feasible location. You had said that even if it's not feasible, y'all can still find it viable and fundable. That really surprises me, because I would think as stewards of money that you'd really want to make sure it was the best use of money.
It all depends on, thank you, Councilwoman, it all depends on the purpose and need of the study. Those alternatives that were looked at, this is an iterative, very complex process where we evaluate all different kinds of impacts. He read a statement from the technical traffic memorandum. That's just vehicular traffic, right? That's just dealing with vehicles on US 98 or whatever facility you're looking at.
And that's what we're looking at.
So there's a lot more to a transportation project than just vehicles. There's pedestrians, there's bicycles, there's transit. Now we have a whole new technology component with automated connected vehicles. There's socioeconomic impacts. There's so many things that you look at in one of these studies, and all of the alternatives are looked at in relationship to the purpose and need that's been established for that study. And there's a whole host of different purpose and needs you could have. So you're asking me questions about the weeds of the study. I don't know the answers to those, but I'm trying to give you the context of what a PD&E study means and how it's done. And so the statement that he read is in the traffic part. That huge binder is just one part of a PD&E study. So, I mean, it's sometimes a 3-4 year process getting through all of it.
Certainly. Well, and of course, the main goal is to get cars off 98. That would be the purpose. And, looking at it as, well, if we did the connector, then we're going to have more multimodal, more people are going to be walking and using their bikes instead of being in cars. Well, I would argue that that would not be the case, or we would have been 2-laning both of them and having multiple pedestrian walkways and bicycle paths. So that didn't really fly with me. What this does tell me, though, and I understand if y'all sometimes consider projects that maybe aren't feasible or viable if you do fund them, because it might help a local government or for whatever reason. But that does tell me that you very clearly will take the guidance of whatever the local government has developed and put together and brought to you. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Councilwoman. It does. And really, while Councilman Mitchell read a statement, again, from the traffic part of the study, just looking at vehicles, there are so many other elements involved with a transportation project. I can't stress that enough. And if you look at the city's multimodal plan, in their comprehensive plan, actually the purpose of the Crosstown Connector is multimodal networking and connectivity specifically related to bikes, pedestrians, and transit. So,
Okay, I'm going to stop there. I do have another thing, like I said earlier, that has nothing to do with the connector, but I'll let everyone.
I will just say this to your comment and addressing my concerns. I just do not want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think this .4 mile road as a 2-lane road, which is what will originally be built, if we could keep it built that way and keep it from being 4 lanes, I would like to pursue it. And if there's a way that Lance and TPO and FDOT can get together and say, you are not going to be jeopardizing this $2 million for right-of-way acquisition that you're going to be on the hook for, you know, and we already spent a lot of money on right-of-way acquisition from our own taxpayers, from our coffers. And so if there's a way to keep this project 2-lane and enshrine it as 2-lane, I would like to pursue that before we kill it. And if we can't, by all means, kill it. But
Councilman Morgan, if I may, that is a very valid and feasible idea to pursue.
Sure.
Staff can vet that, and it is a easy. It's complicated, but yet it's what we do for a living. So
Sure.
it can be vetted, and we can help make that determination.
And I know that you have time constraints on this money because of the demand there is for this money. But if there's, I mean, what are we? We're not looking at a multi-year long process to get us an answer to this question, are we?
No, sir.
Okay. Can I make a motion now? Yeah.
I got 2 people that want to talk,
Okay.
but we can talk after you make the motion.
I'll go ahead and get a motion.
Well,
I move to direct city staff to coordinate with our local TPO agency and Florida Department of Transportation to pursue the viability of keeping Legion Drive from Main Street to Benning 2 lanes and not jeopardizing the funds for this project in a timely manner.
I'll second.
okay, I got a motion, and I got a second. And before we vote on it, do you think?
I think that if council has any further questions, they can go ahead and ask them. And I think you should also open up to public comment, since we have not yet gotten to the public comment period.
Okay, and that might give you a break, because you've been a stellar representative of FDOT for us. I think you've answered a lot of questions, and you've cleared a lot of air. So, want to go ahead and take a vote on the motion first, or do public testimony first?
Do public comment before the
Okay.
motion.
With the recommend, let's,
Mayor,
yeah, because I got a couple, you're not the only one, Steve, that wants to say something.
The council, if they have further questions of FDOT, I think they should go ahead and ask them before the motion is voted upon, too.
That sounds good. That works easier for me, too. Kyron, then Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Not much of a question, but
Sit down, you can stay.
they, everything I've heard is like ghosts of the past, long before I was on council. And the comment that I make in this 4-lane, 2-lane attitude, when the city purchased the campground property, I was very heavily involved, and Ms. Bell was also involved in it for affordable housing. And although it was never voted on, it was an intent by myself and the committee that we were on at the time to use the excess land that we would have left over in that area for to try to build affordable housing. We always, at that time, never, ever looked at the possibility of a 4-lane. The only sections, unless you want to spend a lot of money on buying right-of-way off of Legion Drive, would be that property and Azalea, which has the only other wide right-of-way. But I guess the hard part of me is that I've been on this council, I'll be 16 years. Never has this ever been anything but the following. It was always intended to be a way for local traffic to get home off of Highway 98 without having, without having to, the traffic issues. We have a traffic issue. More tourists are coming and more people. It was never intended to be an alternate 98, which was already been said. It was never intended to be, it was intended to stop at Stallman. That was it, at the end of Stallman, never to go any further. That's always been the intent since I have been on this council, that it be exactly what it's supposed to be, just a way to get from point A to point B for the local traffic. Unfortunately, GPS makes it an alternative route. And the map that we just had up there a few minutes ago, with the exception of that little section, we already have a crosstown connector, and it's not going to change anything. DOT has sit here and explained to us that they have no control over what we do. We can make that decision. If y'all want to kill this, that's fine, but in one retrospect, I've had emails, everybody else has had emails, it's almost 50-50 for or against, to be totally honest, from the emails that I've read. I guess I'm just angry that we've got this far, that they had to go back and, so people have had to go back and dig up studies from 20-something years ago, which were on a shelf, including the Sasaki plan, to try and, the only way I can say it is there was so much misinformation out there, and some of the questions that DOT has answered tonight has proven my point that the misinformation is what's causing a lot of our problems. That's my only comment right now.
Kyron, the PD&E is from 2016.
Yes, the PD&E is from 2016, but again, it's not up to DOT, it is up to the council, whether it's us or a council after us, if they want to make a 4-lane. It would be the stupidest, ludicrous thing to put a 4-lane highway in a residential area. Where it stops now at Beach, sooner or later on Mountain Drive, Seaview, Sea Oats, or Kelly Street, there's going to be some major problems. And also West Legion, as far as traffic goes already. If we put that little section of road in, it may save some lives. That's all.
We got a motion, and we got to take a vote on that in just a second. I've got two council members that would like to talk. Guys, I just encourage everyone at this point, let's try not to repeat ourselves in our questioning. Let it be something new that we haven't heard up to this point. First up will be Mr. Menschel, and then Mr. Braden, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank you for coming, okay? I know I've asked a lot of questions. What I've done, I said in the onset, is that this has been going on for 32 years. You certainly can't answer this question, and nobody up here can answer it. Why are we still talking about it 32 years later? There's been a lot of council members here that have rotated through these seats, and for some reason they haven't voted on it, okay? There's a lot of information there. There is a lot of misinformation.
Steve, this project's been approved and funded.
We're still here.
The decision-making has been done. They've given us the money. This council last week or last meeting is the one that shut it down. So the decisions on...
We didn't shut anything down. All we did was postpone.
But nobody's been kicking it down the road. It went all the way up to the end line, and this council decided to do it.
Prior councils have shut it down, okay?
Not this connector, not this project.
I'm
not
sorry.
the one that was
Okay, well,
approved. I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Okay.
And I'll admit that too. I'm sorry. The 16 years that I've been on this council, we have always moved forward with it for the same reason that I stated earlier. We haven't had problems with funding, of course. We haven't been able to come up with the money. I mean, we spent $4.7 million on the piece of property that we're arguing about right now, pretty much.
So at any rate,
Last meeting, you voted against it,
my
Karen.
question,
I had a reason, you'll find out later.
first of all I wanted to state again, thank you for coming. I know I've asked a lot of questions, and it's an attempt to educate myself to make an informed decision. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I'm the first to acknowledge that. And I'm trying to deal with facts, okay? Recently, we've had former council members put out on social media about misinformation that contradicts what we've heard. So again, we're trying to run through that to understand what's going on. Two quick questions, and just in a recap, okay? I want to ask you now, because I don't know if I have a chance. Totally off the subject. Does FDOT have control over the synchronization of lights on Harbor Boulevard 98? Is that FDOT's responsibility or the county's?
It is ultimately FDOT's responsibility when you have congested corridors that are connected to other congested corridors, a lot of times it makes sense to form a partnership because a traffic signal system is a network. It's not just one facility standalone. And so we have formed a partnership with Okaloosa County, which they do an excellent job managing the traffic signal system. And so they actually actively manage and operate the traffic signal system on off-system and on state system roadways. And so, yes, we are responsible for it. We have jurisdiction over it on state facilities. However, we have formed a partnership with the county.
As the construction's underway right now on 98, and a lot of, obviously, the light masts are down and there's temporary lights and all, is the contractor responsible for those lights? I've been told, and I don't know that it's true, that's why I'm asking you.
The short answer is yes, the contractor is responsible for it. The contractor is required to maintain the infrastructure so that it can be actively managed by the maintaining agency.
Is it possible when they restrung the lights, again, due to ongoing construction, some of the synchronization might have been off?
That's an excellent question. It is very possible because what can happen, there's always a transition period, right? I mean, when you go out there and you tear up an existing road because you're putting capacity out there, there's a transition. All of the detection around the intersection that actually tells the computer that cars have arrived, it's an integral part of that operation, right? And then when you have them all tied together, one intersection with detection problems can affect the whole corridor. So when the contractor's out there and transitioning from what's out there to the temporary condition back to the permanent condition, yes, there can be a lot of very challenging issues with detection, but the contractor is responsible for maintaining that.
Thank you.
Yep. Great question.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you.
And then and after you're done, Rodney, everyone, we're going to go ahead and introduce, we'll allow public testimony before we do our motion and vote. Okay?
My question is actually for staff. Can staff bring back a recommended motion to this council that could basically lock up, or if we want to two-lane from Main Street all the way to Stallman, if that was really the intent? If this council approves to two-lane the connector, then we can have a motion where that portion from Main Street to Stallman is basically locked up and almost, I wouldn't say impossible, virtually impossible, to eventually four-lane in the future.
I'd be happy to work with our attorneys to come up with language like that if I'm directed by the entire council, because I'm still being restricted right now.
Okay. I just want to make a secondary motion then to that effect, that direct staff to, bring us back a motion that if that's the intent, two-lane it to all the way to Stallman.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to have, we might be putting the cart before the horse here. I'd like to get an answer from FDOT before I spend staff resources on researching ways to enshrine this in our comp plan or LDC or whatever to keep this 2 lanes. Is that your concern? Is if we move forward with this road, we want to keep it 2 lanes?
Yeah, I would support 2-laning, through the campground, but I'd want to make it where it can never be 4-lane from Main Street all the way to Stallman.
The primary way to accomplish that is don't spend FDOT money to acquire enough space for future vacant area to expand into 4 lanes. If you only acquire what you need for 2, then the cost of right-of-way acquisition in the future is so high that makes it a practical impossibility.
I think we've already got enough property, but if Mr. Morgan could amend his motion to include all the way to Stallman, because didn't it just include Legion, or from Main Street to Benning?
Yeah, that's right. I'll amend my motion to include the changing the PD&E from 4-lane.
Council members, if I could provide a little more clarification on that. What we'll be reviewing, what we will help review is the changes you want to make and how they affect the eligibility of our financial participation. If you have your own funding source, you can do whatever you want to do. That's all. That's the only part that we're going to review.
But without the $2 million+ for right-of-way acquisition, we'll have a hard time doing that.
Right.
Which is why it's important to me. So yeah, I'll amend my motion to include from Main Street through Azalea.
Ray, do you get the motion?
And my second stands.
You good? Ms. Ramswell, you got the floor, and when Ms.
Thank
Ramswell's
you.
done, I'll
So
let you take a seat.
this does not have to do with the connector. This has to do with the Marlar Bridge, the Destin Bridge, and the significant number of serious accidents and fatalities that we've experienced. We've had several just in a span of a few days. I wanted to see what it would take to get something like this on the bridge where it flashes red light ahead, something to where people that are flying across Okaloosa Island, and then all of a sudden, oh, look at beautiful Crab Island or whatever it is. Well, I could be the other direction. But regardless, all of a sudden they're slamming into the back of people because they've been flying across the island and now they're looking at the atmosphere and not the road in front of them, where all of a sudden it's backed up. What would it take for us to get you guys, because that's a federal highway, right? That spot.
It is a U.S. highway and a state facility, that's correct.
How can we get something put up, something like this, or any of the similar ones that are done, so that people clearly see there's a red light, you need to slow down and pay attention? What do we do?
That's a great question, Councilwoman. And one thing I'll say is a lot of times we see the symptoms and we have to figure out what the cause is. And we have noticed in the past that there are a significant number of rear ends there, and I'm assuming that's what you're referring to as rear end crashes. And that is something that we looked at with a safety study before the resurfacing project was designed. And the safety study, we have a signed and sealed safety study that looks at the symptoms, evaluates all the different movements that are happening, and makes a recommendation of how to alleviate that. And the right turn lane at Emerald Grant is supposed to significantly help with those rear ends. That's the whole purpose of the right turn lane, is to help alleviate the rear end crashes that are happening. Because when you have a right turn lane, when you have traffic that's slowing down to turn right, it creates a queuing effect, which has a backup, and then that causes the oncoming traffic to approach the vehicles in front of them even quicker. So a right turn lane is a proven effective method for reducing rear ends. And so what I'll say is we can certainly look at that, the resurfacing project. When it's complete, we'll see how the right turn lane affects that, and we'll continue to try to make it as safe as possible.
Honestly, that's great, but it's not good enough. We need to do something now. I mean, people are literally dying because of these accidents, and they have no idea there's a light right at the foot and that it's backed up. And they're clearly being irresponsible and flying across. So we need to be proactive in putting something up there just to jar their attention long enough that they can brake and hopefully avoid some of these. We can take them down if the right lane venture works once it's completed. But I mean, Bloody 98 is becoming far too much of a reality in places where it didn't used to be.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate your recommendation. We'll certainly take that into consideration. We want to provide the absolute safest facility we can provide. The tool you mentioned is just one of hundreds of tools that we have to help alleviate those crashes, so we can certainly take a look at that.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Perdue. We'll let you sit down and rest your feet. And before we go into the public testimony and vote on the motion that was made, let's just take a 5-minute break. All right? Sound good? Please take their seats, please. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Come on, hop along. I'd ask you to sprint to your chair, but I'm not that mean. You look good, though. You're walking well. All right, at this point, we're going to open up this to comment because most of the people, the cards I got just want to talk about the Crosstown connector. And seeing how we have the experts in the thing, you don't have to give testimony per se. If you have some questions you'd like the FDOT people to answer, you're more than welcome to ask them at that time, and we'll try to get some answers after you step away from your 3-minute time frame. So we'll start first with Cindy Putnam.
I think I'm the first resident that's been moved because of the Crosstown connector. I have been a resident of Destin for 25 years, and also I was a realtor and an artist, and I have donated thousands of dollars of paintings to Sacred Heart Hospital, American Heart Association, the dog park, every high school and middle school band auction. But my house was on Sandalwood. In the last 2 years, I have been in California taking care of my mother, who is sitting with me. She's now 96 and has heart and kidney failure, shingles in her eye, and dementia. Last September, I was approached by Marcia Hayes, who I believe is your representative for this move, with a price of $154,000 plus additional money from DOT of $40,000 plus professional movers. I agreed to the offer. I said, I understand we need the Crosstown connector. I will do this with you. The contract I received after that said $154,000 with no mention of any additional funds and no closing date. I requested these two things over and over. Upon assurance that the sale was going through, I arranged for someone to stay with my mother. I flew here. I bought a house on Vermont Street in Fort Walton Beach, and I flew back to California. 1 month passed and no word from City Council. No closing, no nothing. I put up an additional $5,000 on earnest money contract to secure another month before we closed. Once again, month passed, no word from City Council. I lost the contract on the house on Vermont. 5 months passes. My mother's health was failing, and my family was trying to decide what to do with her treatment, hospice, aided care, whatever. A phone call from Destin said, you have 2 weeks' notice. We are going to close in 2 weeks. So I was stuck in California with no one to take care of my mother. I was forced to buy a house over online. I didn't get to drive around the neighborhood. I saw the pictures. My realtor looked at it, but I didn't get to see it. But I bought the house, and I arranged with Marcia. I said, I need a professional mover. I can't be there. I have a roommate, but she can't do everything. I need a professional mover to help me pack and move. And she said, fine. The mover that showed up was 2 men in a truck. By that evening, the men were drunk. We immediately stated that we didn't get a table, a big table that matches, we have a 2-table set. The table was gone, and my roommate had contacted Marcia by text and by phone over and over. I'm still unpacking, but I still haven't found my Nikon camera. Okay, when we did the move, the day after moving, I received an eviction notice and a bill for $1,500 for rent if I didn't get out within 30 days. Well, I'd already arranged with Marcia to hire the moving company. So she knew we were moving. She had been there at simultaneous closings of the new house And she knew we were moving, so why did I need that stress? It was just too much. So that's my report on how it went, because I didn't feel like there was any compassion and certainly not any order. Nobody called me to see how it was going, and it just was 2 weeks and an eviction notice, which I thought was horrible. So that's my report. Nothing.
Well, this city clearly failed you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
it did.
apologize.
I just hope they don't do this again. I mean, that's the reason why I'm coming here, is to say,
If this project continues, your story is well noted by me.
good.
Staff, are y'all familiar with the person she noted as her contact person?
I am.
Can you reach out and find out what happened so that it can be remedied and not happen again?
Absolutely.
And not just remedied, maybe rectified.
All right?
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm
bet.
sorry you went through that.
Next up, Miss Becky McFarland.
Hello, I believe this is still on, isn't it? Okay. I'm Becky McFarland. I reside at 644 Seaview Drive in Destin. My family moved here in 1981. I bought my first house on Legion Drive at 708 Legion Drive in 1988 with my husband. We lived there for 12 years. Crosstown, or Midtown Connector, as it was known back in the day, was being discussed. They talked about widening Legion Drive, taking 2-car of our parking area of our apartment complex or townhomes to take care of this. We got it done. We loved it. We bought a house on Seaview Drive, the corner of Seaview and Beach Drive. Doesn't matter what time of year it is now, guys. We're at full capacity all year long. We need that road. I live south of Legion Drive. I lived on Legion Drive for many years. We've been expecting this for over 20. We paid for a campground. We got rid of the people that lived, or evicted the people that lived there, many of which were fishermen, people I grew up with, that were not able to pay for the high rising cost of living. We bought 2 houses on Beach Drive, razed both of them. The vacant lot now is the coyotes are living on it. I live right there, I see them. During spring break, I could not get out of my driveway. I back into my garage, I go forward to get out. Highway 98 had a wreck or something. I am clearly in my driveway to take a left-hand turn to go to Benning Drive. There are cars parked in front of my driveway. They wouldn't let me out of my driveway for several cars. I couldn't believe it. This is during a time period when there's not a lot of people in town, just a wreck. City, we've been through this for many times, lots of different councils. Most of the people in my neighborhood, they don't even know that this thing has been stopped. My niece, Michelle, is on the board of directors for this Chamber of Commerce. Happened to go to a family gathering. I had just read about it in the paper that it was, I thought, tabled. She tells me it was stopped. Excuse me? What the heck is going on? I would like to get most of the people, well, I'm trying to get everybody in south of Legion Drive, or Legion Drive South, even from Kelly Street. This thing is going to alleviate the traffic off of Kelly Street, off of Beach, off of Benning, off of Mountain Drive, and it's going to help. We need this. It was never supposed to go up to 98. It was supposed to stop at Solomon. Whatever has happened in the past, you guys are ignoring what is it, up to $40 million in 20 years or more that has been spent on having this road done for the people of Destin. It's not for the tourists. Yeah, Google's going to make them go back in the back roads. We have no way of stopping that unless maybe down the line we could do just what the subdivisions that are, gated communities. We could have a gate over at Calhoun, and we could have a gate over behind Walmart. And whoever lives in the city of Destin has one of those barcodes on their car, and they just sweep right by like the Sun Pass. I've been saying that for 30 years now.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that you guys keep this going forward. It would be a really big shame if not.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Up next, Bill Marisick. Oh, I probably blew that.
That's all right, you don't go to high school with that name.
Well, you threw me with the gaps between the M-E and the big R and the I. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Bill McKissick at 151 Calhoun. I've lived there for 24 years now. This is my home. I love this town. I love it so much that at one point my career path had to change so I would not have to leave Destin. This is home. I'm from New Orleans originally, so if you can't understand me, that's why. But we talk about big cities and how they do things, how they make their traffic flow, and they all have problems just like we do. There is no perfect solution is where I'm going with this. I don't care what you do with any kind of traffic, there is no 100% perfect solution. I don't know if you've ever been in New Orleans when it's ain't football games going on, but you're not going anywhere. Or if you've been in Atlanta when they got a football game going on, you're not going anywhere. Or how about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday afternoon, either one of the cities, you're not going anywhere. So they don't make a perfect fix for everything, but if we put that one little piece in there, boy, it sure would make our lives a whole lot better. I live on Calhoun, I work over near the Commons, I commute back and forth, and I know every little zig and zag where I can zig through the neighborhoods, miss the school zone, hope to miss the kids on the bike, and make it back. And I got 2 different paths going and coming. Why not direct all of these people to be on one road where they're all directed, they don't have stop signs, everything's going to flow smoothly, and take all of these other people out of harm's way. They won't be going by school zones. I mean, just on the way here from my house, I mean, I turned the corner on Beach, there's 2 kids on a bicycle. You know, how many, and every time you make a turn, you're opening yourself up for an accident. So if we can put this through, I agree with her. Let's put this through, let's get this connected, and let's keep it moving. That's pretty much it. I could go on and on at all the other comments that we talked about, but that's just the point of it. It's gone on for so long. We need to do something and do it soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sorry about killing your name. That's all right. Mr. Buckingham.
A piece of snapper will get by.
Call me later.
Mike Buckingham, 510 Calhoun. Mayor, thank you. Council, thank you. I think you all know where I stand on it. I don't agree with it for multiple reasons. I think there were some harsh questions asked to Jared Perdue here earlier. I think some of the questions were a little tough. You know, in the issue a few years back with the traffic lights and the pedestrian crosswalks down in the Harbor District, I spoke with DOT, and of course Jared was in a lot of the meetings here for probably going on almost a year. We worked on that. There was many conversations about how heavy and how loaded Harbor Boulevard was. It was at its capacity. And, you know, off the record, you know, just conversations of us walking down the road multiple times with his boss, Mr. Gaynor, the statements were made. And the reason I'm bringing this to y'all is because I am one of them that came and stated that DOT said that, you know, the road is the capacity on it is full. And, you know, without some kind of an alternative, sooner or later they're going to have to, then again, they can't control growth. They can't tell you what you can do with your property and what you can't do. But sooner or later they can put the brakes on and say, the road can only hold so much traffic, period. Correct? So far?
I think what you're suggesting is that FDOT could put a moratorium on development in Destin because of the capacity.
I'm sorry?
I think what you're suggesting is that FDOT has the legal ability to put a moratorium on
No,
development.
that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is I'm trying to clarify the comment that somebody had brought this information, false information to y'all. It wasn't false information. What I'm trying to tell you is what really happened and how it was said. And with that said, it was Mr. Gaynor that made the comment, because I've told multiple of you guys that FDOT did say that the road is at capacity, and that sooner or later, it's got so much traffic that we can't keep putting big buildings on these properties without some kind of alternative, because you can only put so many cars on a street, period, correct? Am I close?
I can clarify when I come back up.
Okay. So anyway, that's where that came from. I think, Kyron, I'm a little disappointed in your statement that you just said that that the people aren't speaking. I think you sat 2 weeks ago right here and told me that
Mike,
you have...
just address us as
Yes,
a
sir.
whole,
Okay.
not as
All right, I'll
individual.
address the council. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you, buddy.
That you stated that you've seen it very clear that the locals don't want it. The only ones that want it is the developers and or the people that work for them that is standing up for them. So I just want to make it clear that I am the one that brought it to a lot of y'all's attention, and that's where I got my information from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Looking out in the audience, Mr. Perry, would you like to come up? And I'll give you an opportunity, Mr. Perdue, just in a minute to address that particular statement, and we'll just see where we go from here. Thanks for sticking around. Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and this really, I'm trying to get out of the box of the Crosstown Connector, a little broader questions, if that's okay. I was not sure this was confined to Crosstown Connector, but Mr. Perdue, what I'd like to understand is the timeline on the 3R project, and then what are the plans, as I read in the newspaper several weeks back when we thought you were going to be here a month ago, that there were other plans beyond the 3R project. And can you clarify, did I read it wrong? I got several questions.
So would you like me to answer each one as he asks them, or?
Yeah.
Let's do it that way. This is a little unorthodox,
We'll just be
but
up here together. We'll
we've been
follow.
here for a while now. Let's go ahead and ask them. Go ahead, Mr.
So the 3R project, the specific number of days on the construction, I'm not sure exactly how many days. How many? 600 days? On the resurfacing? Yeah. 300 days on the resurfacing. There's a lot of extra stuff in there. A lot of times resurfaces don't take that long, but we got a lot of extra things going on, just trying, because we did work with the city to kind of reconfigure travel lane widths and all that. And, you know, as a follow-up, you asked what's coming next.
I would like to understand what are the extra things. That's what the paper said, there were extra things that y'all were going to do beyond resurfacing, milling and resurfacing.
So there's milling and resurfacing. We're narrowing the travel lane widths. We're adding bike lanes, and we're fitting as much as we can in within the existing right-of-way. We're also improving a lot of the sidewalk that's out there. You notice there's a lot of issues with ADA accessibility, and you know, there's a lot of improvements that are needed. So there's a lot of odds and ends going on, just trying to bring everything up to current standards.
And if anything, what's planned, if anything, beyond the 3R for Harbor Boulevard, which is from Airport Road to the bridge?
That's a great question. We actually have funding in our work program, $1.5 million in fiscal year 21 for a PD&E study of really Harbor Boulevard. It goes from Calhoun to Airport. That's the limits of the study. The TPO actually had a priority for a study of the Stallman 98 intersection, but we went ahead and funded a study for those full limits because of your multimodal plan and the desires of the city to develop the harbor district. And so there's a lot of aside from travel lanes, a PD&E doesn't just address vehicular capacity. There's a lot of other improvements that can be made to the infrastructure for bicycles, for pedestrians, for safety, and those type things. So there is a PD&E study in fiscal year 21.
So if I understood, tonight was the first time maybe I missed it, but there was even talk that the council was considering canceling the multimodal plan. And my question is, as a property owner in the harbor district, okay, a commercial property owner, the property owners have always talked about having a trolley system within the harbor, just not a trolley that goes to Walton County, but a trolley just in the harbor district. And so if the multimodal plan were to be canceled, would that impact having a trolley on Highway 98?
That's an excellent question, but probably more geared towards the city of Destin because the multimodal plan does belong to the city.
I know from a hazard standpoint, though, of having a vehicle traveling 5 miles an hour with people, I'm thinking of something similar to what Pensacola's got. They've got about 3 trolleys that go, Pensacola Beach, excuse me. They've got about 3 trolleys that go around and around. People jump on, jump off, jump on, jump off.
Right.
Would that impact that?
So we do participate in some transit funding, federal funding. We're a pass-through agency, but transit is actually the responsibility of the local government entity. So that would be a question for the city again.
So it would not harm, canceling the multimodal would not be something that would stop putting in the trolley system.
Again, that would be a good question for the city of Destin.
Okay, that's my question. Now, the next question quickly is, if narrowing the lanes, like you said, and putting bicycle lanes, is that what you call it? Lanes?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible that we could get this speed limit reduced from 35 miles an hour down to, say, 20 miles an hour? Wouldn't that make sense to do that? And how do we go about doing that?
So that's a great question. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, did you want to? Oh. So speed limits do not actually, the posted speed of a roadway is an engineering tool. They don't actually control the speed that motorists drive. The facility, the way it looks, the way it feels is what really influences the behavior of motorists. And so the posted speed limit is actually set based on what the operating speeds are. And research has proven if you lower the posted speed limit, it does not necessarily reduce the speed that vehicles are traveling. It's the corridor and the feel of the corridor, right? And we've got case studies. I mean, we had a road in the city of Tallahassee where the posted speed limit was 35 and people were continuously driving 15 miles per hour over the speed limit and getting tickets. We actually raised the posted speed limit. The operating speed stayed exactly the same.
That's shocking.
Is that all you have?
One other question. Okay. And this is, has the TPO encouraged or asked the FDOT to think about an alternative on the other side of Choctawhatchee Bay, up there on State Road 20? And if so, why can't that be done? What is it about it that's so complicated that we can't get that done? I just don't understand why the military would not cooperate. I don't understand why Gulf Power, who has taken some land for a solar farm, why can't we think out of the box and get that done? But the first question is, have they asked y'all to do a study and to put that on the agenda?
So State Road 20 is actually part of a federal designated freight network. And so we have coordinated with the TPO, and there is actually funding on State Road 20 to evaluate future capacity. So that study is actually underway right now. We're doing a feasibility for Walton and East Okaloosa counties.
Thank you, Claude. I got a lot of people who want to talk. Those are great questions, too, by the way. And thank you for the answers, Mr. Perdue. Anyone else? Okay, we got a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to go ahead and close this portion of the meeting.
Mayor, can he answer Mr. Buckingham's question?
Sure.
Why is up there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I've answered several questions since then. Could you please restate the...
If Highway 98 capacity reaches, in FDOT's estimation, max capacity, beyond max capacity, over capacity, do y'all have any kind of ability to regulate development?
Thank
Or
you.
issue
Yes,
a
okay. So
moratorium?
we have no authority over land use, land
Ever.
development. US 98 is currently most times at its available capacity for vehicles. Sometimes it's at its available capacity for pedestrians in very specific areas. So there's a lot of conflicts, a lot of interacting movements, and there's times of the year, not just day, when it's operating at a level of service F.
But in no scenario ever would FDOT have the legal ability to put the brakes on development in the city? Okay.
Thank you. That was the question. That was the answer. All right, so now we have that motion.
Would you like the motion?
Yeah, I was going to
Thank
get
you.
ready to do it because it was like 2025 that we asked that, had made that motion. Oh, no, that's in the future. Go ahead, Ray.
Motion is to instruct city staff to coordinate with TPO and FDOT agencies to determine the viability of keeping Main Street to Stallman a two-lane road and still retain eligibility for funding for the Crosstown connector.
That was it. All right. Is there any further comment?
There's no funds involved in that, right? That's just asking staff to look into it.
There's funds involved, $2.7 million.
No, I mean in the direction to look into this scenario.
Human labor, just time.
You're correct. All right. Seeing no further comment? The vote is unanimous. So moved. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to give you a kitchen pass at this point. I really appreciate y'all weighing in and being part of the discussion. You really cleared the air, and your expertise was greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I think you'll find that we do truly want to build good partnerships, which is why we came to answer these questions. And I would encourage, if you have any additional questions, just have staff reach out to me or any of my team. We are available to answer questions. We'll work through anything, any issues you have, and try to make it as pleasant a process as possible. So thank you.
You will follow up with those questions that we discussed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Similarly, when might we be able to expect a response regarding the signage on Marlow Bridge?
Actually, my department head that is responsible for the design of the resurfacing is here. I'm going to let him go ahead and respond to that question before we get out of here.
You thought you were going to get away.
He didn't want me to get away with no fun. We've actually incorporated signs just like that on the project already. It was added after the project lit, so that's probably why he didn't know about it and why y'all were not aware of it as well. But there are signs, what we call rapid flashing beacons, we're going to put on the bridge that begin to flash when the signal turns red and a vehicle is detected on the bridge. So
When is that going to be done?
it's in the 3R project, resurfacing project ongoing right now.
Is there any way to bump that up? Because, I mean, as he mentioned, that if that right lane is completed and it alleviates the problem, then it's
Sure.
essentially a moot
And your
question.
point is sooner the better.
Absolutely, like
We can-
now, yesterday.
We can talk to the contractor. We kind of hesitate to get into his means and methods and his schedule, his sequence of events, but we can definitely mention that to the contractor.
Thank you, that'd be great.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you know all that happened Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Multiple rear-ending accidents in that spot, including a fatality.
Well, thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Sir,
All right.
thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming and participating, answering our questions. All righty then. I think we probably covered item number 3. But just in case, because we're a little bit out of sorts, is there any other comments by the public on any matter that's not a public hearing? Seeing none? Oh no. Remember, Marcy, you get to talk at the end again because of Mr. Menchel. Yeah, but I got the gavel. Come on up. And you can still talk at the end.
Hello, everyone. Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court, Holiday Isle. I just wanted to talk a moment about a meeting that I attended back on May the 28th, the TDC meeting. I'm going to ask you that if I misspeak to please correct me. But my concern bringing to your attention is the safety of not only the locals but the visitors to our beaches, including some of the things that Ms. Ramswell, Dr. Ramswell spoke about. In that meeting at the TDC, they were doing a preliminary on the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget, and the total revenue that's collected by the TDC in that budget is approximately $24 million. And I'm saying this because I would like the public to know the numbers because they don't attend those meetings and it gets a little lost. So of that $24 million, over 40% of that, $9.5 million, is earmarked for sales and marketing. And only 10% of those dollars are earmarked for public safety. So we're spending upwards of 40% of the TDC money to bring people here, to market to them, but we're only spending 10% of those dollars to protect them. So I'm bringing this to your attention. Well, let me finish with some of the figures real quick. Okaloosa lifeguards get 29% of those, of that less than 10%. Destin lifeguards get 39% of that money. Marine/law enforcement gets 26% of that money, and new equipment 4%, and then they have a reserve of 1%. One farther breakdown of those monies is that the Marine Okaloosa County, which is all over Okaloosa County, not just Destin, is earmarked for $500,000, and it's a 2% increase over last year. And the Destin lifeguards are earmarked for $873,000, also a 2% increase over last year from $856,000. So the reason I'm giving you these numbers is because of situations that are happening out on the beaches, specifically the young gentleman that passed away this past weekend that my daughter and her friends were witness to. I want to mention his name because I want to acknowledge his existence in this world. Craig Carlos Rodriguez. He lost his life, and the reason that he lost his life is because we don't have appropriate resources for the safety of the people that come to visit here. It was a senseless death that could have been prevented had we had the proper resources. I'm so sorry I'm getting upset about this.
All right.
It's not the first time.
Take your time.
It's not the first time. There are dozens and dozens of situations on our beaches that people don't know about, and the people that are saving those people are our locals. My own daughter saved a life when she was 14 years old. She had the proper training because she had been trained by the Okaloosa County Junior Lifeguard Program. And I'm just really asking you guys to help us do something. $2,200,000 when we're spending $10 million to bring them here, and we're not even doing anything to protect them. Thank you for your time. I apologize. I did not know I was going to get upset.
It's okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close this portion of the meeting, and we will move into the item number 4, City Manager Report. Take it away,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Item 4A is Resolution 1907. It deals with purchasing policy. It actually is going to put the federal requirements into our current purchasing policy, which is the 2 CFR 200. If there's any specific questions, Mr. Farmer is here to answer those. This document was reviewed by legal and by the county's legal.
And you had a recommended motion on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, waiting for one of those.
I'll go, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'll make the motion to move the council adopt Resolution 1907.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? Vote unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thanks, sir. Item 4B is an update from the last meeting when we were requested to look into the traffic signal synchronization, and we have Mr. Burgess here to follow up on that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Received some correspondence from Okaloosa County and District 3 of the Florida DOT concerning the last time that the 98 corridor was assessed for the synchronization of the lights. That was back in 2016. That was the same time that the pedestrian signals were placed. Some additional information they provided is that the US 98 arterial in Destin, Florida currently services about 368,000 vehicles per week, and that was in the study area. 20 traffic signals were retimed and coordinated along a 7-mile corridor, and that also included the signal over around in between Publix and Destin Commons off of 293. In addition to the loop system that Mr. Perdue was referencing earlier that actuate the signals, letting the system know that a car's in the queue, they also use some new non-intrusive Bluetooth data. They receive information from the vehicles themselves, letting them know where they are and how fast they're moving and such. And incorporating that technology, they're able to save about, now this is back in 2016 before the 3R project and before the widening project on 98. But approximately 5,000 vehicle hours weekly were saved for that. And in addition, their estimates for weekly fuel savings, about 10,000 gallons a week. And they did have a couple of recommendations associated with this timing project, kind of timely. The DOT fellows just left. But what they've recommended is that the City of Destin consider reconstructing the northbound approach at Harbor Walk Village and the southbound approach of Stallman Avenue, so they kind of square up. Right now they don't meet at 90-degree angles, and it kind of limits their capability to move traffic through that intersection because of the way the signal has to be programmed. In addition, it's recommended that City of Destin should reduce the southbound skew, that's exactly what I just said, as much as practical to allow for an 8-phase signal operation versus the current split level, which isn't as efficient. There's some other recommendations on here that aren't really pertinent to 98, but just figure I'd give you all an update on that.
I got a question for you. When Ms. Ramswell gave us that presentation at the end of last council meeting, how robust is what the county is doing or plan to do when we get done with the 3R project compared to what she presented? Is that something close to that, or is what she was showing us a lot more robust?
I did ask that question to Mr. Autry, the Okaloosa County Public Works Director, as well as a fellow named Cliff Johnson with District 3 of DOT. It is their belief that they will again reinstall a loop-based actuation system versus cameras at this time. I believe there are some cameras set up. Mr. Perdue referenced the construction project and how those loops get damaged in the process, but they have a temporary camera system that detects cars. So along with the loop system, the Bluetooth tracking systems that the technology that they've employed, that's, I think, about the extent of new technologies in that.
Thank you. Up first is Mr. Mitchell and then Ms. Ramswell.
Shows her first, but that's fine, whatever. Okay, no, I just, gotcha, no worries, okay. Do you want to go first? Go ahead.
It doesn't matter.
Go ahead, please.
No, I don't mind.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for that report. I sent a message to the city manager. I know we only got page 6 of 14 pages, so it'd be interesting to see what the other pages note, because obviously this was just the executive summary. I want to tell you a firsthand experience I had today. I was at Matthew and 98 coming here. It was 5:10 p.m. specifically. The light turned green at Matthew, northbound, and it stayed green for 26 seconds. Okay, 26 seconds. Obviously, yeah, okay. Obviously, there's problems. I have a meeting tomorrow with the city of Okaloosa County. I'm going to visit their traffic facility. I've been doing a bunch of independent analysis along 98 for the last couple of weeks, and I have a bunch of charts and all that I've produced, and I'm going to come back to the council with some information. But we obviously have a problem. I was very happy that Mr. Perdue couldn't answer many of our questions tonight, but at least he could answer the question about the timing and at some of those lights. I was given that information, but I couldn't confirm it. And I would submit to you that obviously because of the construction, some of those timing's off. Something else that it has to do with synchronization. I was going to bring it up during my time, but I'd like to just point out one other thing that happened and something for us to think about moving forward. I realized there was a fatality on Friday, okay? On Thursday, there was a 6-car wreck on top of the bridge. And I had the pleasure of being stopped on top of the Brooks Bridge coming back to Destin. And from the top of the Brooks Bridge to the Marla Bridge, it took me an hour and 26 minutes. Now, I talked to a friend of mine that had gone through there, and I know positively the wreck had been cleared out. All of the cars were gone. But because of the light at Stallman Avenue and whatnot, it took an hour and 26 minutes for that light to sink to allow all the cars from the top of the Brooks Bridge. And something we need to think about, I don't know if it's us, I don't know if it's the sheriff's office or who. In situations like that in other cities, law enforcement officers and maybe our code enforcement, I don't know who, it's something that we could work on. They go to the traffic control box and they pull what they call here the pickle, and it's into manual control and that. What was interesting to me and what was incredible is when I got to the light at Stallman, I could drive 35 miles an hour because there wasn't a car there. The problem was clearly that light. And that has nothing to do with construction. That's just something that we need to look at in the future. When we have those type of emergencies, how do we manage that?
Sheriff's office would be...
Well, but we have to figure out...
Talk with Charlie about
Right, absolutely. But it's definitely a situation like that. And then one last comment right now, which is a problem. The Matthews intersection, when you're traveling eastbound on 98 right now, I don't care what time of the day, you can count on having backup to Walmart, okay, because of that light at Matthews. Okay, so that's it, but thank you.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for bringing up about the type of technology and synchronization that's used, because the one that I presented is the most current technique that people are starting to employ in different cities, and it's far superior to what we have. And the other thing that I would love Mr. Autry to look into is, all of them being green at the same time and platooning giant sections of traffic through, because that's really going to make a huge difference. Green means go is one of the sayings that they use. And then I was also going to make a similar comment to what Mr. Minshall said, which is, typically when there are major accidents with backups for miles, you do almost exactly what we were talking about with the light synchronization. You've got someone there that's keeping that light green on the other side of the wreck to funnel everybody through and clear the roads. So those are just, some simple things that we need to look at having them employ that I think can make an immediate impact.
I think that's a discussion we can have with Captain Nix on tragic situations like that where you have only one lane for over 2 hours, where it's going to be a problem, so they could divert some resources to help us there. I would be interested to see a cost comparison on what the county's providing us now versus looking into the technology that you've been researching. Maybe Michael, could you maybe dig around and see if we were to take it a step further for traffic control within the confines of the city limits, what that cost would be, is something maybe we can budget.
And feel free to reference that PowerPoint, because it's got some of the names of that current technology that you could use in your conversation.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to, and I don't think he would mind, but I got an email from a DOT rep, and back and forth conversations through email, and he replies, well, as much good was done as the result of the 2016 retiming project, much of those efficiencies go straight out of the window as soon as the orange barrels are placed in the field. Our construction project managers do really try to maintain reasonable traffic flow through construction zones, but it is an immense challenge, understandably so. And I certainly will forward that information to Mr. Showers, Mr. Autry, and the fellow Mr. Johnson with DOT.
Thank you for looking into that, and we appreciate you continuing to stay on that.
Mr. Marler.
What Mr. Mitchell said about Stallman, it's not just the Stallman lights. You have two pedestrian-activated lights just past Stallman within a football field's distance of each other. They are, half the time, I will tell you that I see nothing but ghosts. Because somebody will press the button, they get impatient, they jaywalk, and the light and then the light turns red. So we need to do something about trying to get, either change them how they're done, or less time for the pedestrian, I don't know. But that also causes part of the backup. So it's not just the light at Stallman, it's also those two lights, the one in front of AJ's and the one at the corner of Fisherman's Wharf and Marler Street parking.
That's a great point, because when they're tapping those to cross, it makes it change. So then it's pulling everything out of sync again. So the idea is to have everything green going this way, and then when those turn red, then the crosswalks go. So it's logical and smooth.
And I think we put those, the Destin City Council, the previous ones, are the ones that installed those. I don't think that was FDOT, so.
FDOT did, and we.
But that was at our request though, right?
We paid for it, and then FDOT's supposed to refund us.
So maybe we need to look into revamping those, or changing those, or maybe getting rid of those and make the crosswalks at the lights themselves.
Doesn't work.
So, yeah, I don't know. That's just something, food for thought. Mr. Mitchell, that's right up your alley. Being a former public safety guy, maybe after you get done with your magnitude of binders you have right now, maybe get Public Works to take a real hard look at those crosswalks.
Well, and yes, and just real quick, I appreciate and I understand and I agree with what Mr. Marler said, but the other day, that was not an issue, okay? It was strictly the light at Stallman. Okay, that's all. But I do understand that that does happen sometimes.
All right. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick announcement. We will hold a brief CRA board meeting before the next meeting at 5:45 to approve the audited financial reports for the CRAs. Also, a quick announcement, pending your response to this. We're scheduled to have a workshop on next Monday, the 24th, regarding Stallman Avenue intersection. I don't want to say the assuming word, but I'm going to say I'm assuming we want to move forward with that. Is that correct, or?
I don't see, Stallman is its own animal in of itself, so council, you guys still want to have the workshop on addressing Stallman. That's a totally different issue. Sure?
Yep.
Good? Yep, press on.
And that is all I have tonight.
All right, well then I'm going to turn it over to Miss, well, I guess Kyle, you didn't get the beeper didn't go off? You're still hanging with us. For those of you that don't know, Mr. Bowman's wife is ready to pop any minute now. So he's been on pins and needles this entire meeting, especially when it went into the second hour. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Hurry up.
Go ahead, sir.
All right, I believe we pulled 5A and 5B and continued that to the next meeting. So we'll do the first reading of ordinance number 19-09-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2, zoning maps, to include a change in the zoning designations generally listed and depicted in attached Exhibit A to match the assigned land use designation of the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into the land development code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. I believe we're going to conduct this as a quasi-judicial hearing. Mr. Zanguzzi, are you going to testify on behalf of staff? If you could please stand and raise your right hand. Mr. Zanguzzi, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth? Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to testify on this matter? Seeing no one, I will turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, sir. Any comments?
Just to mention, Mayor, good evening, and good evening, council members. Just to mention that this is a continuation of the work that we started back in February, where we identified conflicts between our comprehensive plan and our zoning map. And as you recall, at that time, you did ask us to pull areas 7 and 15 for further consideration, which we did. And then at our last public hearing, you also asked us to pull area 4 and 5, which we did, and we're bringing you the rest of that for your consideration today. As you know, back in February, and I continuously have mentioned this to you, this is a very important aspect of our work in terms of providing both clarity and certainty to our land use regulations for both the citizens, development community, and our staff. And so I look forward to the discussion this evening, and hopefully we can move this process along.
Okay, well, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I can make that motion.
Go ahead, sir.
I move to approve ordinance 1909 LC on first reading and direct staff to advertise the ordinance for second reading.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Discussion on this? Thank you, everyone, for doing your homework. Let's go ahead and have a vote. Webb had to step outside. Let's, you want to just take a roll call vote? We'll give it one more chance there, Rodney, and if that don't work, let's just take a roll call. No, it's not happening. Okay. Ms. Braden. Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Ms. Overdeer. Mr. Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
And Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Votes unanimous, so moved. Your batteries run out? Okay. All right. Mr. Zanguzzi, one more step. Keep
Yes,
up the good work. I appreciate it.
And if I could, Mayor, it's not?
It is.
Just share with you what the next steps will be left for us to accomplish. So we'll have to revisit areas 4, 5, 7, and 15, and then amend the comp plan to address the TCMU, height issues, and density. We also have to revisit the comp plan to address and include requirements from the state as far as coastal developments are concerned. And then hopefully, finally, update the development code when everything is done. So that's what's ahead of us at this point. So I'm going to try and work to get a work session with you to address 4, 5, 7, and 15.
That's, I was going to ask you that question. So you'd like a workshop format so we can freely share our ideas and concepts of what we want those 4 parcels to be.
Correct.
So that's what you're requesting. Lance, do you want to try to put together some dates and then present them to the council members and myself and see which ones that we can work out? I know he's trying to move as fast as possible to rectify all these. That's just the first one. We still have, that's quite a bit of work on that list right there. So I guess that would be the next step is to set a date for a workshop specifically for that.
I'd be happy to do that. If I could ask one quick question, because we have the 4th of July coming up. So we have a workshop scheduled for next Monday. Is the council interested in having 2 workshops in 1 week, or do you want me to move on past the 4th of July?
Right after the 4th. You got the word. I saw a lot of bobbleheads after the 4th.
Move past the 4th of July?
Yes, for that workshop.
All right.
Sorry, Liz. That's good, okay. All right, Ms. Ramswell, I saw you had, I will clear you. There we go. All right. And then, item D.
We have the first reading of ordinance 19-11-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to Election Day, providing for authority, providing for amendment of the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9, elections by amending Section 9-4, Election Day, providing the election day for council members and mayor to be held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday of November in each even-numbered year, providing for reaffirmation of the candidate qualifying dates prescribed by the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9, Elections, Section 9-8, Candidate Qualifying Dates, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is the first reading and a public hearing. Just to remind the council, this is part of the direction at the last meeting. Council directed the attorneys to submit a request to the AG clarifying whether council has the ability unilaterally to move the election day. And then council also directed us to bring back this ordinance for first reading. If it passes tonight, we will hold it in abeyance until we get the answer from the AG back.
Do you have any timeline on when we'd get that Attorney General opinion?
Often 3 to 4 months seems to be the length of time to get that opinion back, but the AG operates on our own schedule, so there's no guarantee.
All right, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Okay, I'll move to approve ordinance 19LCC on first reading. 19-111.
Second stands.
Just remember public comment.
All right, I got a motion, I got a second. I'll open this up, public comment at a time. Any public comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Let's go ahead and take this. Is there any other discussion needed? Nope. I was waiting for that. Ayes have it, so moved. I thought you didn't have very many opportunities. I thought you were going to pass it. All right, item number 6, consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
Got a motion, got a second? Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have one for staff. Sorry I didn't get to ask you this beforehand, but are we making headway with the parking requirements for the open-air seating?
Yes, we will bring something for discussion our first meeting in July.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you. I have something, but it builds on the item underneath Mr. Menschel, so I will stand by.
Standing by. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have listed under my name the Sheriff's Office proposal budget, and I'm not getting into a budget question. Let me caveat this before we start. I had the pleasure, if you will, of sitting out in the audience for many, many years listening to council. So I took notes and I understood different council members had different presentations. And I knew Dr. Ramswell had done some stuff with the Sheriff's Office. So to avoid any disclosure type thing or any sunshine thing, I reached out to our attorney and asked our attorney to reach out to Ms. Ramswell to ask her to bring this presentation here, because I knew she had this stuff. So I just want to clear it, but it's not a coincidence she has it. She's got it because I asked her to bring it because I knew she had done it in the past. So we didn't have any offline conversation. But with that said, what I was talking about is, and Ms. Ms. Bell brought up some very useful information, and Captain Nix isn't here. First of all, I am 150% in support of the Sheriff's Office. This is not about the Sheriff's Office or anything they do. But for the public, we've got an increase of 6.5% for Sheriff's Office services this year. And again, I'm in support of the Sheriff's Office, but the bottom line is I think we need to look at an alternate funding source. The sheriff himself says, and has given presentations here numerous times, that 82% of the calls for service year-round come from tourists. Somehow or another, we've got to get to the TDC, building on what Ms. Bell said and everything else, and whatnot, okay? And we've got to get to the TDC, but we have to let them understand. Understand one thing. Everybody, you know, people up north end of the county, they always complain about Destin gets. Destin is the cash cow for Okaloosa County. If all of a sudden crime elevated in Okaloosa County, or in specifically Destin, and people didn't come here because of the crime, obviously it's going to impact the whole county, not just the city of Destin. It's going to impact all the businesses in Destin. So again, I'm in total support of the Sheriff's Office. I just want us to start thinking about the TDC. They've got to pony up more money, because the citizens and the homeowners of Destin shouldn't be the one to pay for, constantly paying for tourists getting protection from the Sheriff's Office.
Ms. Ramsey, you want to weigh in?
Sure. So a few years ago, actually, I think it was back in 15, I worked hand in hand with then Representative Matt Gaetz on a bill that would actually give another 10% to fund public safety and first responders with the TDC or TDT funds. And this was an effort that had begun a couple years prior. I think Commissioner Fountain had tried to work on that with then Senator Don Gaetz, and they did not gain the necessary traction at the time. But fortunately, back when I helped Mr. Gaetz, and I should say Matt Gaetz, representative, so it's not too confusing. But back at that time, we actually did gain momentum, and the bill passed. Because I literally sat there and helped word it with him, it was worded specifically such that it said that the new 10% would not supplant existing funds that were being used for the first responders. And they did that specifically knowing that we were already spending a significant chunk of funds on lifeguards and such on the beach. That's why they put in the verbiage, supplant. It cannot supplant, because they knew we needed more than the 10%. So if you look, I actually went to the TDC because they did not interpret the bill that way. And to this day, they continue to just do 10%, and all of their documentation says up to 10% and refers to the 10% cap. And that is not accurate, nor was it the intention of the bill. In fact, when you look online at the analysis that the senators and the representatives actually do to actually spell out what the bill means, it reiterates that. It says, literally, these funds are not used to supplant pre-existing expenditures on these services. So my point with this is that now the TDC has changed how they report different items. They used to literally put everything itemized. This went to the bathrooms, this went to maintenance, and that report was issued every single month. And in fact, that's how at the time I had discovered, I think it was $400,000 or $500,000 was being spent on bathrooms on Okaloosa Island. Well, they've changed their reporting structure, so now it's kind of lumped together and it's a bit harder to figure out. But the gist of the matter is, even back in 15 and 16, before this bill was passed, the county was spending about 1.1 or 1.2 million at a minimum on the lifeguards. Now, there were additional funds, but I don't know what those are because they're not spelled out. Right now, they're continuing to do the lifeguards, but they're only doing 1.9. So what's happened is they're doing the lifeguards, which were an existing expense of at least $1 million, which should mean that we have at least another $1 million that they can use to fund first responders and public safety throughout this county. And so I really, really would like to encourage maybe Mr. Destin, since he sits on that committee, or I'd be happy to come back and make another presentation if that's allowable, considering we sit on the same board, I'm not sure. But I would love to have us look into that, because clearly we have an issue. That Destin Fire Control District fought for years to get more for the Destin lifeguards than what was being given to the Okaloosa Island lifeguards. For years, it was $500,000 each, when we have like quadruple the number of miles of beach and significantly more tourists on the beach. Well, that hasn't changed, and we clearly need more officers. We need more marine units. And I really think we need to be getting our TDC to take a look into that. The Sheriff's Office funding, giving them some additional money. And it's there, and it's an allowable expense. And we need to try to make them and encourage them to see that as well.
Go ahead, Parker.
Yeah, since I'm the TDC rep, my suggestion is Preble, reach out to Jennifer, the TDC director, and set yourself up as an agenda item for the meeting in a week. I think it's the 25th. And probably if you have a preliminary meeting, that'll go a long way to setting the stage so that we can have a productive meeting. But you'll have my full support.
Great, thank you.
And Parker, in that kind of negotiation, when we're talking about sheriff's budgets and stuff like that, Lance, is that something that traditionally the city manager participates in, or, how's that work? Does the city council members weigh in on what they think is 6% fair or right, or, how's that negotiation process between what the sheriff office is asking for versus what we want, or what we need, or what we think that, we ought to be getting?
I know when Mr. Casella was city manager, he attended the meeting and I spoke. When Ms. Lejeune was here and I went and spoke, she actually spoke as well. So it's pretty much up to our discretion, the city manager's discretion, et cetera.
I'm absolutely happy to help in this endeavor and support our partner however we can.
Okay, we just nod our heads. You can work with the Councilwoman Ramswell and yourself and Mr. Destin, our TDC representative, and let ask the right questions and see if we can get some answers, and then negotiate at some point with what we're going to get for the money that they're asking for.
Clearly, because we can help each other. I mean, as Mr. Minchell pointed out, and as we've heard from the sheriff's office, 80% of their calls are for non-residents. So we're paying all of this money to cover tourists that are coming here and enjoying themselves and all that. So it makes sense that the TDC could fund a significant chunk of that, and at the very minimum, at least the amount they're allowed by law in Florida statute.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, moving on. I've got some other stuff.
Okay.
That was just item one. But again,
Damn it.
Thank you, both.
Pardon my language.
I'm in total support of the
It's
sheriff's.
20-9.
Total support of the sheriff's office, and I'm not against the 6.5%. It's strictly trying to get alternate funding. The next item, last meeting, we put up a photograph of a home that had all the bags of trash next to the trash cans. Mr. Marley, you brought up the fact that you thought the contract obligated them. I was in contact with Waste Management. That's the previous contract. They do not pick up the plastic bags anymore. But thanks to Waste Management, on this bill for Destin, in the information portion of the bill, they're going to have a reminder not to put the bags out there. So a big thank you to Waste Management for putting that out. In last meeting, I also brought up about the unsightly grass along 98 and whatnot, and we were debating whether or not it was our responsibility or not. Staff provided information that according to the Land Development Code, Article 8.01, it's the responsibility of the budding property owner to basically maintain all the landscaping. So if we could just get that word out to everybody, it'd encourage some more public information spots, if we would, from our people, and maybe the chamber or anybody else could get to the businesses and just say, hey, it's your responsibility, and some of the areas really look bad, so we'd really hope if they would help us clean it up. For staff, can you give me an update on the Ben Arrow blighted property location?
Sir, and that right now is in the process of code enforcement. I could talk to offline, or me and the land use attorney can talk offline on it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Overdeer. Mr. Marlar.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick things. One of them, in reference to what Ms. Ramswell said about the signs on the bridge and everything, you got to get people to read them. And that's been the biggest problem because I have a personalized tag on the back of my truck which has my name on it, so I do not want to see the headlines that Councilman Marlar has been speeding. So I do follow the speed limits on the island. And I love that wonderful signal that people give me as I go to 35 on the bridge. At one time, I did try to get the DOT to drop to 25 miles an hour, and a law enforcement officer from many years ago had explained to me how that worked. He says if it's posted 35, they'll go 45. If it's posted 25, they'll go 35, because they're just trying to get another extra 10 miles out of it. I mean, I would hope and pray that people would finally read the signs, but you know, that's the hardest part of anything, is people to read the signs and actually follow the rules. The second thing, which also has to do in a sense with that, is there's a Facebook site that I kind of look at sometimes, and we had a complaint from a citizen about the garbage on the west side of the bridge, on the island side. And I'm not really sure, because our sign says, city limits says it starts at the west side of the bridge, even though we have to cross the bridge on the east side to get to actual land. I think the jurisdiction is like multi, because it's on federal property, the county with the state and the county controlling the road and everything. I'd like to see if Public Works could look at the possibility of maybe helping out with the garbage on that side of the bridge. Maybe we can work out something with the county that we can alternate or something or another. But we have a lot of, and then there are nice garbage cans. It's not just garbage. There's nice garbage cans, like what the city uses, but it doesn't have a city seal on it. And but the citizen was just wondering. The citizen stated that they had at times before had picked up the garbage, but they couldn't do it anymore. They changed vehicles, and their vehicle wouldn't take the crappy garbage. So if we can do something about that with the county, I'd like to see that. And that's about the only other thing I had.
Thank you, Mr. Marlar. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to nominate Mr. Quentin Selby to the Harbor and Waterways Board.
Second.
I got a motion and got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved.
Mayor, one last item. City Manager, if you would, can we bring some dates for the budget building process? I know that we had talked about creating a more collaborative approach with multiple meetings and workshops as we lead up into creating a final budget for Bragg to generate into a passable legal budget in October. So can you bring us some more dates? I'd like, I get how this process is probably going to work. I know we had requested that each department head come with their wish list of items. Clearly, I know that the wish list will not be within budgetary realm, but I'd like for them, or within budget. And, I know we're going to have to constrain and prioritize which projects we'd like to see, but that's a process for council to do, and I'd like to see it done as quick as possible, because I know if we keep delaying, then the looming deadline of adopting the budget will start to influence how we approach this. So I'd like to get the ball rolling as soon as possible.
Very good. I'm going to ask the same question I asked before. Do you want to try to double up in that week prior to the 4th of July, or push this past the 4th of July?
Probably past the 4th of July, but not by much. And if this one is, well, yeah, let's go with that and see what dates we have. That's all, Mayor.
Yeah, maybe we can do 2 in 1 week after 4th. Mr. Morgan.
I would like to nominate Mr. Scott Fisher for membership to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Ayes have it, so moved.
And also, I don't know who to reach out to them, but our Little League teams have had a lot of success, and I'd like to see them in here to recognize them. So, Lance, if y'all have a contact, just maybe give them an invite or something.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I know that the girls softball or whatever, they're my neighbors, so if you do need contact information, I can help.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little presentation to start our next meeting. The only thing I got tonight is driving down by our new city parking lot with the property we just built and the one we just did. It is perfectly pitch black when it's dark out. So, could we look into getting some lights on those parking lots? Is that?
Yes.
I don't think it'll break the bank, but it is dark, dark, dark. All right, and that's the only thing I got tonight. Ms. Kopp.
I just have an update on the BI litigation, which was voluntarily dismissed with prejudice and concluded back in April. As you know, generally, executive session transcripts are exempt from disclosure under the public records and sunshine laws until such time as litigation is concluded, and that would allow the city to discuss case strategy and costs outside of the sunshine. Once litigation ends, the documents are no longer exempt and have to be disclosed to a party that requests them. I've attached an email in your agenda package from the attorney for the Destin fishing fleet, where basically he acknowledges as the case intervener the conclusion of the litigation, and he requests the executive session transcripts. The city did immediately provide those transcripts, given that the litigation was over. So my update right now is that the attorney for the intervener has received the benefit of seeing the executive session transcripts, including our strategies and negotiations, and is now seeking on behalf of his client to essentially force the parties to continue litigating by arguing motions that have obviously been rendered moot by the dismissal. So at this point, attorneys for both BI and the city believe that the position of the intervener is not consistent with Florida law and the rules of civil procedure. And I wanted to give counsel this update and advise you that at this point, even though I told you previously that the litigation was concluded, there may be additional costs involved because we have an intervener trying to prolong it.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the council? Kyle?
Nothing for me.
Boy or girl?
Boy.
Awesome.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
For Kim. Can we countersue for any legal fees that we're going to acquire now after the fact?
Not at this point, but it's not something that I would rule out in the future.
Okay, thank
We'll
you.
keep you posted, though.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments?
Public comment? Public comment?
No, the ordinance not passed. Come on up. Yes, ma'am, I did. Whew. I just wasn't fast enough. Come on, Marcy.
Okay, you know who I am, Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. Just real quick, I wanted to let you know that I attended the helicopter meeting at the airport on Wednesday. I attended the Crab Island meeting at the county building in Shalimar on Thursday. Most important to both of those meetings, in my opinion, was what the National Park Service had to say. With that said, I don't need to give you a report. You don't ask me for a report, I'm just giving it to you. Over the weekend, I had contact with code compliance in reference to parallel parking at Osteen, and I would like to report to you as a citizen that I had a A++++ response from them, and I was very happy about that. I also had several contacts with the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office in reference to parallel parking. They were 5 minutes late behind code compliance and taking care of that. Hold on, I have more to say about that. Hold on. It was also in reference to, I also called in reference to the stolen vehicles that were here in Destin. They apparently were on my street that evening, but that's a whole nother story. And I was also witness to a battery. So back to my comment about earlier, and in reference to code compliance and the Sheriff's Department, because of our shortness of resources, whether we're calling them to our streets, whether we're calling them to our homes, our beaches, wherever we're calling them, there aren't enough of them to go around for all the calls that they're getting. And I'm just telling you as a citizen who's calling them. I wanted to also just mention 2 quick things, and then I'll let you go. Both public beaches at the west end of Holiday Isle, the beaches where the condos are. I mentioned this at an earlier meeting with the National Park Service. Most people don't realize that all those condominiums from the Destin on the Gulf west to the jetty, there's approximately 800 condominium units. That's 3,000 people on the beach. There's 1 lifeguard there, and he hasn't always been there. So with that being said, actually, I think maybe there might be 2 now. There's 2 now. But the one was down at one end and we didn't have it. Anyways, my point being is that if there's ever an emergency, the resources are very scarce for 3,000 people. If one incident happens, 2,999 other people are left unattended. And at the East Pass, we have 1 lifeguard at the Finger Jetty with hundreds of beach goers. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And the incident that happened over the weekend that made me upset a little bit earlier was not specific to his situation, because he's at this end and that happened over at this end. So I've made a public post on my social media page that you're welcome to go and read. And the last thing I wanted to say is we welcome visitors to our beautiful beaches, but with it brings seductive waters. And I would love to see Destin have a brand of being the safest beaches in Florida. Thank you.
Marcy, one thing, go on, back up just a second. At the helicopter workshop, what was your feeling, the end discussion, about the tour helicopters? What was the
You want the overall
just
temperature of the room?
Yeah, a brief summary would suffice. Everybody wants to go home.
The overall temperature of the room was that the FAA is not following their own regulations, and the National Park Service is not happy about that. And pretty much they got a scolding from everyone in the room, the aviation board, the people from Washington, from the National Park Service that are telling them that they are breaking the rules, county commissioners that were on the phone, and of course, the gallery of public that were there. There was something else I was going to tell you, one last thing to note about that. Oh, the skies of western Destin have been extremely quiet since Friday. There are no helicopters flying near the National Park Service because they were breaking the law. In my opinion, I'm not the expert, but that's what I understand by the maps.
Marcy, was it basically the FAA said that if they didn't see it, it didn't happen? Or if they got to see it?
So the comment that was made was similar to my description. My description correlation is if you're on the road and you report somebody to the sheriff's department, don't take that offensively. A lot of times, if they don't see it, they can't do anything about it. So it's kind of the same thing. FAA was saying if you send in videos, they didn't count. They can't be older than 6 months old, or they don't count. And there's this long, arduous way that you have to go through to report it. So that was kind of like what I thought.
Thank you. I knew
but I'm not the expert.
I know, but I knew you went. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.